Welcome to tonight's meeting. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands we are meeting on today. We pay our respects to elders, both past and present. We acknowledge and uphold the continuing relationship to this land. Welcome to the meeting, everybody here this evening. I just want to introduce the councillors from Lake Ward. We've got Councillor Bond, Councillor Sirikoff and Councillor Copsey. From Gateway Ward, we have Councillor Consolo, myself, Councillor Martin, who's just will be with us in a moment, and from Canal Ward, the only one in the chamber at the moment. Congratulations, Councillor Rhonda Clark, but we'll soon be joined by the Deputy Mayor, Tim Baxter, and Councillor Louise Crawford. They're just outside attending to something. They'll be joining us shortly. I remind attendees, and welcome back everybody. It's good to have people back in the Town Hall, so thank you for coming here this evening, but it's particularly good to have you here. I remind all attendees that any member of the public addressing Council must extend due courtesy and respect to Council and the process under which we operate. We would also ask you to take direction from myself, the Chair, whenever called to do so, and speakers must remain respectful and statements or questions must not be defamatory or offensive in nature. They should also not be aimed at embarrassing a councillor or a member of Council staff or relate to a matter outside the powers of Council. Councillors, before we get into tonight's agenda, it's important to note some serious events happening throughout Australia and Eastern Europe. These events are of great interest and personal impact to a number of members of our community. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the many Port Phillip residents, business owners and staff who are from Ukraine or have family and friends based there. The crisis is devastating for all of you, and we offer our deepest condolences and support wherever possible. We also offer our thoughts to our strong Russian community, some of whom have deep roots and family in Ukraine, others whose family and friends are impacted by the crisis, obviously. Many residents of Port Phillip have lived the horror of war, some in the distant past and others who have escaped recent conflicts. For all of these people, the events in Ukraine will reignite memories and fear and the sadness, and all of you are in our thoughts at the moment. Secondly, the flooding events in Queensland and New South Wales are very concerning to all of us. I know that many of us will know people and communities affected by these floods, and I hope that everyone remains safe and well until these conditions ease. Councillors, thank you. And thank you for officers for suggesting and putting those messages together for our community this evening. Councillors, I advise that the confidential report of item 17.2, M9 Advocacy on Housing, has been withdrawn from tonight's agenda due to changes in the Victorian State Government policy. Councillors, first item is apologies, of which there are none. We're all here this evening. And item number 2, moving to that, is minutes of the previous meeting. Councillors, those minutes of the 16th of February have been circulated. Are there any questions regarding these minutes? There being none, I would ask for a mover of the minutes. Thank you, Councillor Martin and Councillor Sirikoff to second. I now put that motion to accept those minutes. All those in favour? That motion is unanimously carried. The third item on our agenda this evening is declarations of conflict of interests. Does anyone have a conflict of interest in a matter being discussed tonight? I understand, Councillor Clark, you do, in relation to item 17.1. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to declare that you've advised me that due to the nature of the report and that with my employment, I have a general interest in this item and therefore will exclude myself from the discussion or vote on this matter. And furthermore, I've not seen any of the materials or any of the reports associated with the item.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. There being no further declarations, I move to item 4, which is public question time and submissions. And it's, again, great to have you here in person. Thank you. To start off with, I call upon Harry Granger submitting a question to Council. Harry, welcome. If I could just get you to state your name and suburb, and you and everybody else has 3 minutes. Welcome, Harry. Thanks for coming in. That's okay.
Press that. Oh, there we go. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for having me, guys. I'm Harry Granger. I'm from St Kilda.
Great.
I'm just here to talk to you guys about pigeon feeding in residential areas. Probably not the most exciting thing you guys have had to talk about or listen to in the last couple of years, but it's something that's kind of causing a bit of issues in my area. I just have a question. The question basically boils down to, is there plans within council to either limit residential bird feeding in the next couple of months? Because I've spoken to Ellie Tonks in regards to this, just because there's three main reasons really. One, bird feeding in residential areas can cause pretty serious diseases in older members of the public. Two, it attracts rats and mice and all kinds of stuff if you don't clean up, which I have noticed in my area. And three, the mess that they leave behind when, post-feeding, really, it's just pretty poor, really. So when I spoke to Ellie Tonks, she basically said Port Phillip Council doesn't do anything in regards to that, and I was just wondering if in the future there could be something done for it.
Give us some more details of your lived experience, if you could, in terms of, you're not talking about the odd chip to a seagull down the beach, I take it?
No. I'm basically talking about residential as in people. Well, I have a couple of neighbours who like to feed the birds from their balconies, and there's cars and stuff underneath the balconies, which when the birds take off, their droppings end up on the cars, which damages the car's paint. It damages, there's sellability and all that at the end of the day. But also like the diseases and stuff that you can get from birds, like pigeons and wood pigeons and the like, it's pretty poor. You can get bird fanciers disease, which, although it doesn't sound pretty bad, it's a chronic lung disease that can, it's fatal essentially in older public members. So,
thank you. And do you live in an apartment building or a
yes,
house?
An apartment building.
An apartment building.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for coming in, Harry. We really appreciate it. It's a good question. Wow, first off the cab of the rank again, questions. Councillor Sirikoff, you got a question for the questioner?
Yes, I do, Mayor. Is this something that you can raise with a body corporate?
I've just recently moved. I moved in maybe 2 months ago, but I've spoken to body corporate about this, and I've spoken to other neighbours who are affected by this. And they all have, well, the other neighbours affected by this are obviously a bit kind of like, well, yeah, get something done. Body corporate says they can't do anything. I have a sneaking suspicion it's because they're quite good friends with the person who feeds the birds.
We won't go down that track.
We won't go down that path.
But let's hand over to the officers. Kylie Bennett's going to give us some insight here, and the question, just to repeat, is, I'm paraphrasing, but are there any plans within council to stop feeding birds in their houses, etc.? But also it might be interested to get some information of what regulations, if any, we have in place at the moment. Thanks, Kylie Bennett.
Sure. Thank you, Harry, and through you, Mayor. There are no specific plans within Council to stop people from feeding birds at their houses. However, Council's public health team can conduct a site-specific investigation to determine whether the circumstances constitute a public health nuisance, and I'll ask them to make contact with you, Harry, in relation to that. I would add our previous experience with these cases informs us that it can be a challenge to fully establish the build-up of bird droppings at a location and whether that's dangerous to the health of another individual or not. Our experience is also that usually the matters are resolved privately, or in the case of flats and apartments through the owner's corporation rules, but as I indicated, we'll ask someone from Council's public health team to reach out to you, Harry, around a site-specific investigation.
Perfect, and we'll ask one of the governance officers just to grab your details, Harry, so we can facilitate that for you. I'm sure we've got them, but just to confirm, we do actually have them.
Cool, awesome.
Thanks for coming this evening, we appreciate it.
Thanks,
our pleasure. I call upon Alex Darton submitting a question to Council. Alex, welcome. I like the T-shirt. It's the old Met logo, right?
It is. Firstly, my name is Alex Darton. I live in Elwood. First time here, first time I've witnessed any of this. But my question's regarding the medium strips, both from St Kilda Town Hall, specifically all the way down to Glen Huntly. And I live on Brighton Road, so it's outside my apartment. So the question is, who is responsible for the tree planting and the ongoing maintenance of the trees on the medium strips? And what plans does the council have, or are there any plans in the works for these median strips?
Great question. Lachlan Johnson, one of our officers, is going to offer an answer. Lachlan, welcome.
Through you, Mayor. The maintenance of Brighton Road, the road section that Alex has asked about, is the responsibility of the Department of Transport, so Vic Roads. The City of Port Phillip has a contractual relationship with Vic Roads around different assets to be maintained. So at the moment, Council is responsible for the maintenance of the trees that have been asked about, but the actual maintenance of the verge and the other elements in that area remains with Vic Roads. There aren't any plans at the moment to undertake tree planting along that section of road. Council's actually advised Vic Roads that we will be ceasing maintenance of the trees under contract at the beginning of April in this year.
So it sits in the... So if Alex would like to advocate for increased tree planting or better maintenance or different type of maintenance...
Better use of it in general. Like, it started off with flood mitigation, because where I sit, I watch whenever there's a rain, it just washes all the water from the roads, and it's 4 deep on my side, out and 2 down the side roads, and just floods past all the time. So it was like... Right. The use of them, the grass is up to my knee in some parts if you walk through it, so it's clearly just uncared for space, and there's got to be many a better option to utilise it in multiple different ways than just leaving it as it is, which seems to be the format that's going on there.
What I suggest you do is obviously... I'd be happy to do this for you. Send me an email with your concerns and your ideas around it. The reason being is you're in a political nightmare in terms of you're in a couple of seats here. So you're in the seat of Caulfield and the seat of Brighton also along Glen Huntly Road. So
there are many. Yeah, okay, yep.
So I'll do the legwork for you. If you send me an email with some of your advocacy ideas, I'd be more than happy to forward them to the relevant people. And also, if we've got a contact at Vic Roads, we can send them to as well. Thanks for coming tonight, though.
Beautiful, thank you.
No problem at all.
Through you, Mayor, I'd like to see that email too, because I've got a contact at Vic Roads.
I need all the spell checkers I can get, so happy for you to read that. Thank you again. I call upon Helen Halliday submitting a question to Council. Alex, if you just give your details of the governance officers as well, just so I know who you are. Oh, we've probably already got them. Helen, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Helen Halliday. I live at 2 Albion Street, Balaclava, and I'm also ringing here about issues around greening Port Phillip. As you may be aware, the Council plan for 2021 to 31 provides a number of issues that are to be addressed under sustainability. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, greening or tree planting doesn't warrant a mention as being one of the things that the Council is considering as part of its strategy for the city. However, under Greening Port Phillip, on Volume 2, page 76 of your operating budget, you've allocated in the year 2021-22 $740,000, in 22-23 $740,000, 23-24 $640,000, and 24-25 $640,000. My concern or my question is, how will the community know, and how can I know where and how many trees are being planted in COP in this year 2021-22? I haven't been able to establish numbers or locations for those trees. My second aspect of that question is what criteria is being used when making decisions about where the trees should be planted. My third question is, where can we view the tree planting program so that the community actually knows in advance where those trees are proposed? My fourth question is, where is the most up-to-date information of progress to reduce the impact of hotspots, with particular reference to areas of social need? And having said that, I noted the answer to the questions asked by Alex and about Brighton Road, and that is a very clear opportunity for the council, which has apparently had responsibility for that area over a number of years. I actually happen to know that they had a proposal to increase the trees along there, which has obviously not happened. And I don't know who set standards, but if the council is not concerned enough to do its own homework, how will we persuade the state government to do something?
We'll add that as the fifth question in terms of previous plans on tree planting on Brighton Road. But we've got 4 questions there which we've had beforehand, so I'll ask Tony Keenan to answer those for us. Where is Tony? Oh, hi, Tony. You're hiding behind there.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor.
Thank you.
For this financial year, there are 894 trees being planted. That includes all trees, not just the ones directed under greening Port Phillip. The street tree planting program is based on the priority list from the Street Tree Planting Guide, which is available on the website. And this year, greening Port Phillip is being reviewed and updated, and this will cover a whole range of issues, obviously including tree canopy cover, heat island effect, social data, increasing biodiversity, etc. But that's happening this year.
May I ask a supplementary question?
Yeah, go for it.
Given that the program was established in 2017 and a number of areas have been done and others haven't been done, what I would really like to know is by what process will you be doing this work? And 850 trees is actually, I think, the figure for last year. My understanding is that you've got 40,000 to spend this year, which is more than 2/3 the amount that you spent last year.
Go ahead, Mr.
Through you,
Tony
Mayor.
Keenan.
It was 894 this year, and that would depend on what trees. So if there were some palm trees planted, for example, on Beaconsfield Parade, the cost of those is immense. So the amount spent would depend on the trees that were planted. In relation to the criteria about where trees will be, that'll be developed as part of the greening Port Phillip work, and the priorities, that'll be done through that.
And sorry, I had a governance officer spoke to me, but for question 3, where can tree planting program be viewed in terms of the plan to do it? I presume that's on our website and the policy.
It's on our website, yeah.
The actual achieved per year, did we answer that in terms of where we've planted, the results of the plan policy?
In terms of where, I would have to take that on notice, and no, I don't have that where the 894 trees were planted. No.
Great. And if you could also take Helen Halliday's 5th question there in terms of the previous plans on planting on Brighton Road, any proposal that we've had in the past and any future proposal we have, that'd be terrific. If you could get officers to look at that, that'd be great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for your clarification, Mr. Chairman. Much appreciated.
My absolute pleasure. Now, we're going virtually now, so I call upon Maddie Wells submitting a question to Council. Maddie, can you hear us?
Through you, Mayor.
Sorry.
He has been unable to log on at this point in time. We can happily read out the submission for you.
Let's do that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Certainly, through you, the submission reads, I'd like to start by thanking the councillors for voting for the motion to have the trampolines reinstated at the adventure playgrounds. This has made a lot of children and their parents very happy. Given that this motion was passed 2 weeks ago now, when can the community expect the trampolines be reinstated? Chris Carroll mentioned that the council were waiting for a report outlining some options for the trampolines. Could you please confirm whether the trampolines will be replaced like for like, as implied by the use of the word reinstate used in Councillor Bond's motion?
Okay, let's bounce over to Felicity Leahy and welcome again to City of Port Phillip. Felicity.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Pearl, thank you for the question. I can confirm that officers have obtained quotations for the trampoline reinstatement. and will proceed with a similar style trampoline, which will be the same size or, where possible, a larger Olympic-sized trampoline will be installed. Either option will allow for improvements to the surrounds and the compliance to the Australian standards. Once the details are confirmed and a definitive timeline is in place for the installation, we can provide that advice to the next council meeting. However, officers are on track to undertake the preliminary site works shortly.
Thank you very much. I call upon Mark Endicott, speaking to item 10.1, Park Street Streetscape Improvement Project Consultation Outcomes. Mark, thanks for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Mayor Pearl and councillors. I'm Mark Endicott, local resident at 1 Albert Road. I fully support the proposed plans for the development of Park Street. There are three key points I'd like to make. Point one, Park Street is a critical bike link. If cyclists are riding to or from South Yarra area or Anzac Station to South Melbourne, Port Melbourne or Fisherman's Bend, they will always take the most direct route to their destination. It's also important to emphasise that Park Street and Albert Road serves different rider demands, and both need to have dedicated bike lanes. Point two, there will be significant increase in the number of cyclists in the future. Currently, Park Street is widely used by cyclists already, and this will increase in the future with the development of new buildings in the area, the opening of Anzac Station and the reopening of Domain Road. One must also look at the proposed future development of Fisherman's Bend. The Victorian Government says around 2050 there will be 80,000 residents and employment of 80,000 people. The CDM research report commissioned by Council assessed, and quote, "We assess Park Street corridor as having the highest commuter cycling potential and Albert Road having medium potential," close quote. Point three, the safety of pedestrians and cyclists is critical. If dedicated bike lanes are not put into place in Park Street, this would pose a significant risk to cyclists and pedestrians, because cyclists are still going to use Park Street because it is the most direct route. In conclusion, the current plans for Park Street provide the perfect balance in improving the street to make it more attractive, which it needs, and putting in the right infrastructure for cyclists and pedestrian safety on the most direct route, being Park Street. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mark, and thanks for coming this evening. I call upon Fraser Reid-Smith, speaking to item 10.1, Park Street Streetscape Improvement Process Consultation Outcomes. Welcome, Fraser. Is it on?
It is indeed.
It is. Thank you.
Mayor, councillors, I also support these proposals for the beautification of Park Street and for the construction of bike paths between St Kilda Road and Kingsway, as outlined. It's not surprising to learn that the majority of residents and businesses who engaged with council officers regarding this project also supported it. Park Street is a strategically important east-west bike riding connection. It will link the Domain Precinct and Anzac Station to South Melbourne, Port Melbourne, South Bank, Docklands, Fisherman's Bend, etc. It will also be a link from South Yarra and beyond via Domain Road. Park Street provides a more direct rider connection back and forth across Kingsway to these locations, more so than any other alternative route. Park Street will be the bike route of choice for cyclists travelling to and from Anzac Station. Now, cycling activity in precincts 2 and 4 is anticipated to skyrocket in the foreseeable future with the construction of many new residential towers. A review of planning permits shows that more than 1,500 bikes will be housed in these developments, all of which will use Park Street to cross over Kingsway. This is in addition to the hundreds of bikes already housed in the vicinity. Many cyclists choose to ride on the Park Street footpaths rather than expose themselves to the safety risk of riding on the road. With the projected increase in bike traffic in Park Street, a separated bike path is essential for safety reasons. Also, the proposal recognises the growing bike use trend. It will improve local access in the City of Port Phillip and allow and assist in lowering the ever-increasing level of traffic congestion. As CMD research notes, a well-designed Park Street bike link makes really good sense regarding strategic alignment, cycling activity, crash history, commuter demand, catchment capacity now and in the future, and ease of delivery. Finally, and very importantly, I commend Council officers on the thorough and comprehensive papers they have prepared for this agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you, Fraser. I call upon Joe Leong speaking to item 10.1. Joe, welcome.
Thank you. I represent the Park Street neighbourhood group at South Melbourne, would like to object to the proposed development of Park Streetscape improvement project, particularly Section D, part of Park Street between Kingsway and Murray Street. The proposed plan is poorly designed, inadequately researched, and lack of communal consultation. I object on 3 grounds, so I'll go through them one by one. Firstly, the proposed bike lane is redundant as there is already a bike lane in Albert Park Road nearby, which connects the domain or the future Anzac station directly to Murray Street. It also connects to some of the attractions in the area, including the lake, the aquatic centre, and other attractions. The Albert Park bike lane is established in a park-like environment with ample buffer from moving vehicle. We cannot see the value of duplication of another bike lane. And coupled with another nearby bike lane in Doka Street towards the city, there are already provide extensive network for cyclists. So after Albert Road, Park Street, Bank Street, Doka Street is the one that have parallel bike lane that service all of those areas that mentioned by previous speaker. In addition, there are high recorded crashes at intersection at Kingsway and the Eastern Road roundabout. It is advised to create another extra bike lane at this intersection, further complicating the traffic flow, including turning tram number 57 and pedestrian crossing 10 lanes of traffic on both sides and turning vehicle into Kingsway, which we all know is the busiest intersection in Melbourne. On legal front, the Council will be open for future liability for knowingly introducing a bike lane at this intersection, which have recorded high level of crashes. On the contrary, anecdotal evidence have suggested the intersection at Albert Park Road is much lower recorded crashes. Therefore, cyclists should be encouraged to use this established, well-connected in the park-like environment bike lane, or extra measure could be introduced to further improve and safeguard the safety of the cyclists at the Albert Park bike lane. The most direct road is a matter of judgment, whether you come from the city end or from the suburb end. I believe the extra mile that you have to cycle is around either 100 to 200 meters or something like that, which is very short because it's literally parallel to it, and it already connects this domain junction, and it has been used. So the argument for a more direct road is really depend on which point of view. It is for commuter or for recreation cyclists. We are in the inner city, so most of the people...
Great, Joe. I'll just get you to come to the end if you could.
Okay, sorry. I'll move on to my next. Why install a temporary bike lane if it to be removed? The tram line, when the tram line would be installed in the future. According to the master plan by the rail project, the design of the bike lane is different from the one proposed by the current council. The former one is more palatable to the local community, and therefore we urge the council not to contradict the design by the railway, which is going to be superseded the current bike lane in terms of the location of it, which we'll come to it in a minute. What is the point of changing the bike lane again when the project is... when
Joe,
the
if we get you to
project,
come to the end, that'd be great.
Pardon?
Another 10 seconds or so if you come to the end, that would be great.
Oh, sorry,
you
I have to move
3
on
minutes.
to my second point. Sorry, this is my first time and I have to represent...
That's okay, no trouble. We're just glad to have you here, but if you come to the end, that would be great.
Okay. My second point is the position of the bike lane, which is between the curbside and the off-street parking. The bike lane will impact how residents access to the car. As is the common knowledge, often the traveller cyclists at this dedicated gold plate bike lane are travelling at high speed. I won't quote any cases because of limited time.
Okay.
Accident is waiting to happen between pedestrian and the bicycle.
Joe, the councillors, we have your submission here so we can read it. Just perhaps if we could read the last line and we'll move on if that's okay, because we're well past the 3 minutes now.
I'm sorry, maybe I cannot speak as fast as I could. I'm representing the group of people who have submitted 13 petitions.
That's fine. We have the submission in
possible.
writing, so councillors can consider it and read it. But maybe I'll just ask you to take a seat now because we've been able to read through it and we've got it clearly
I'm sorry,
here.
I didn't really judge the time quite well. I just want to make my last point
Very quickly, that'd be great.
Yes, which is very important. I shouldn't have wasted so much time previously on that. Is the location of the bike lane, which is going to be changed in the future, and it's going to cause problems. So I won't elaborate. You have my submission there. Lastly, the proposed bike lane will take away 13 car park in the area, and we have the petition is relevant to that.
Right.
I believe my petition is submitted, so I should be able to present my petition.
Thank you, Joe. We've got everything we need. Thank you so much.
I still haven't answered my
I have to bring you to
question
an end, I'm afraid. All right, we're well past the 3 minutes.
How about the petition, which I will believe to be said is have passed through?
Yep, I'll ask for the officers to give a status update on the petition for you, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and I know it's your first time, and sorry if you now think I'm the bad guy, but thank you for doing that. But we have your submission written here, and we have read it. I call upon Emilio Badua, speaking also to item 10.1. And if you give me the Italian version of your surname and put me to shame.
Yes, I shall. Thank you, Mayor and councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak to you. I won't be long.
That's fine. Just state your name and your suburb would be great.
Yes, 1 Albert Road, Melbourne.
Just your name would be fantastic.
Emilio Badoer.
Perfect.
I am a professor of neuropharmacology, which in essence is I teach and research how the body functions and how therapeutic agents influence those functions. But the thing that I say first to students is the best therapeutic you can do is exercise. And that brings me to this point, because cycling is a critical component of exercise. I'm an avid rider. Mark is an avid bicyclist. We are talking about strategically important bike paths. And there are multiples of them. And we need multiples of them because they service different directions, different endpoints. There is going to be a huge growth in cyclists. Fraser indicated that. In the next little while, there's going to be a huge growth. We need to plan for that. And we need to have multiple strategic corridors, cycling corridors, to accommodate the dramatic increase that we will see into the future. I think also within that, we need to think about how are we going to make it safer? Not only for the cyclists, but for the pedestrians and the motorists. Having a dedicated bike path on multiple strategic cycling corridors makes it safer for cyclists, makes it safer for pedestrians, and makes it safer for motorists. And my final point, this is a fabulous opportunity for beautification of Park Street. And I think that's really critical. The description of the flora, the pot, the planting that's going to happen, that's going to be fantastic. What a terrific way to be riding past, walking past, having coffees, connecting to your community, connecting to your neighbourhood. What a fantastic opportunity it is. And I'll leave it with that. Thank you.
Thanks for coming this evening. We do appreciate it very much. I now call upon David McGowan speaking to item 10.1. Welcome, David. And again, I'll just get you to state your name and your suburb, and I'll start your 3 minutes when you're ready. Great. Thank you. Go ahead, David.
Thank you, Mayor. My name's David.
No problem. Just hit the button on the microphone if you could, David.
Press it, but...
There we go. As we probably left it on before.
Sorry.
No need to.
My name is David McGowan. I live in St Kilda Road, part of Sub-Precinct 2. I have issued to councillors some yesterday and today a different document in part to this one. This one leaves out my criticisms of the documentation that you've been received and some of the stats. Mayor and councillors, as a resident of the immediate area, there is much to like about this project. The project offers to turn Park Street into one filled with plants and trees, and it is no wonder that a survey that asks the question, to what extent are you happy with the proposed streetscape improvements, 64% replied positively. I'm surprised it wasn't more like 100%. So what is the problem? Fundamentally, it is the inclusion of a bike path in Park Street east of Kingsway. I'm only talking about east of Kingsway. So in 2018, the Council's 10-year ITS identified 4 criteria for selecting bike routes, which is relevant to the last speaker. The first was ease of delivery. Local streets avoiding key traffic and public transport routes. That's exactly what Park Street east of Kingsway is, both a key traffic route to cross over and turn right into Kingsway and go to the beach, and a fixed line public transport route. In 2019, the local state member, Honourable Martin Foley, told the local community group that it would not happen, a crazy idea in view of the tram route. Local councillors have agreed the super tram stop has complicated the use of this section of Park Street. Officers have finally agreed that traffic options are limited and peak hours are currently bottlenecks. The recent design update assists this issue, but at the expense of the footpath and hence pedestrian use. The case for a bike link in Park Street east of Kingsway ignores the reality of the following. This section of Park Street is, as I said, a major traffic and public transport route. The difficulties imposed by the super tram stop on the function of the street, 4,000 plus residents and workers, all of whom will utilise the Park Street footpaths from 22 development sites within 100 metres of Park Street. The future completion of Anzac Station, which according to the project team will also swell the number of pedestrians accessing Park Street, together with the added tram routes to run down Park Street. The proposed bike path will be on the footpath for 80% of the combined length.
Thanks, David. Just come to the end if you could, please.
My message is simple. A bike path in Park Street east of Kingsway will cripple the amenity heart of the sub-precinct, Reducing the footpath width to potentially 1.8 metres makes no sense. How will the community stop and chat? Small children walk with parents, owners walk dogs on their way to the park, all whilst people rush to and from the tram stop or in and out of the new developments. Too much is being expected from this part of Park Street. Availability of funds is not a reason to proceed with a project scope that cripples the optimum use of the street. By all means, upgrade the footpath to cater for the increased pedestrian use, but please, on behalf of the community that live and work in the area, ensure that a bike path east of Kings Way does not form part of the Streetscape improvement project.
Thank you.
I thank you for your indulgence.
No, thank you. I call upon Adrian Yong to speak to item 10.1. Adrian, welcome. We'll just get you to state your name and your suburb, and your 3 minutes will start when you do.
My name is 3Q Adrian Yong, and I live in Park Street, South Melbourne. Now, I want to address 4 issues. One is concerning the existing footpath use, footpath usage, and out of the 8 businesses that was interviewed by the council officers, only one of them has got roadside dining, and he's concerned that he did not get a reply back in writing before he gave his support. So I think he's still waiting for that. Now, coming back to Park Street, there's no question that beautification works is very much welcome by everybody there. All right? But unfortunately, when you look at the bike lane, and everybody has been talking about the CDM report, research report, but there is one very important qualification there on the data that was used. And it says that the data is highly skewed towards sports cyclists and is very unlikely to be representative of the wider riding population. Now, I think we've got to be very careful when we read a report that's got a qualification like that. Okay, now, even based on the report findings, Park Street is already very safe for cyclists. It is, in the report, it says that there is a very high existing demand by cyclists for Park Street. Although I don't agree with that, but nonetheless, we accept that. But then on the crash assessment, it came up with there were 37 bicycle accidents recorded for Docker Street, 35 along Albert Road, and 18 along Park Street. So you got a very high demand, very high ridership, and you got 18 accidents. So I think the conclusion is Park Street is already very safe. Now,
great, we're almost at the end as well. Adrian, if you come to the end, that'd be great.
Okay. There's a discrepancy in interpretation of the survey and submission as well. All right, and according to my colleagues who did a detailed assessment, they found that it's 23 of the survey and submissions is in favor, is against the bike lane, and 14 is in favor.
Thank you. I'll get you to come to the end, Adrian, if possible.
Okay. The conclusion is, I think we welcome the beautification works, but I appeal to council to just hold on the bike lane and to resolve these discrepancies as I've quoted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming this evening. I call upon George Swinburne speaking to item 10.1. Welcome, George.
Thank you, Mayor. Is that on?
Yes. That is. Just get you to state your name and your suburb.
George Swinburne. I'm from the Hallmark it has an extensive frontage to Park Street East in South Melbourne.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors, for hearing submissions tonight on Park Street. Might I state at the outset, an extensive report and updated material was only made available on Friday on the Park Street project and contained many inaccuracies that cannot be challenged. From the council report, there was only a limited support for the protected bike paths, and I suspect several who supported it were those who appeared in October from Albert Road, who it is doubtful would have ridden a bicycle in many years and who have had the ulterior motive that it is not to have the bike paths in Albert Road. It has never been suggested that Albert Road East be the alternative bike path route, but it would be preferable to Park Street. The Shrine to the Sea proposal had the bike path coming down to Rack Road, crossing Kingsway, going behind McRobertson Girls High School, then along Albert Road west to Murray Street. This would satisfy all parties and make Park Street impossible, and would not make Park Street impossible from a pedestrian and traffic perspective. Even the present width of Park Street will present unacceptable congestion and dangers in emergencies, and evidence of this has been provided to Council in recent times. Everyone should support the improvement of Park Street and its greening, but not at the expense of narrowing it and the long-term congestion in Park Street, abandonment of sufficient room for street furniture for dining, and what in effect will reduce the very wide footpath to a narrow width for use of the footpath by pedestrians to a single file. Virtually all parking and loading access has already been removed from Park Street between Kingsway and St Kilda Road, and protected bike parks will make the use of Park Street virtually impossible. The proposal ignores the fact that we have protected tram lines in the middle of Park Street and the accessible tram stop at Wells Street, and the increased tram routes to be diverted along Park Street will significantly increase pedestrian traffic. Numerous cyclists, a great number of whom do not live in the area, have apparently made submissions at the behest of Cycling Victoria. The City of Port Phillip should protect its ratepayers and residents. We have pointed out numerous times the defects and potential results that the bike paths not proceed until Anzac Station is completed. The effect of a number of developments required to have active frontage to Park Street have been completed, and the main road is reconnected to Park Street. Submissions on the effect on Park Street of the closure of Cobden Street have also been submitted. Is this not a reasonable request? Council seems anxious to spend a government grant without concern for the effect of the project on those who live on Park Street or in the nearby area. Rectification, if possible, and especially if it is necessary to proceed with the Shrine to the Sea route as an alternative solution for the problems being created in Park Street, will be extremely expensive, particularly for ratepayers. Please, councillors, defer this project until the extent of development and use of Park Street is assessed, alternative routes for the protected bike paths have been properly investigated, and a project we can all be proud of is implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call upon... Somebody turn this off. There we go. I call upon Gillian Barclay speaking to item 10.1. Thanks for coming, Gillian. Just get you to state your name and suburb, and your 3 minutes will start when you do.
Okay, I'm on. Right. Gillian Barclay. I'm here representing Lillian Canham Kindergarten, which is at 97 Eastern Road, adjacent to Park Street in South Melbourne. My committee have put in a submission with a number of items there, and I think they're speaking later on online. But I've been asked to give an operational perspective from operating the kindergarten. And basically, well, firstly, who we are. We're a not-for-profit, community-based kindergarten. This year's our centenary, so we've been in the neighbourhood 100 years. We have 88 children who attend our 3- and 4-year-old programs, and we have a staff of 12 teachers. And at the moment, the issue we have, irrespective of all the different stories we've heard tonight, is parking. And we wanted to use this opportunity to hopefully have some consideration given to our parking concerns. Of the 12 teachers, I would say probably half of them either walk or cycle to work, but the remainder have to use their own transport. So parking around our vicinity is so tight at the best of times, but we would like to ask that whilst the Park Street streetscape is being reviewed, that some consideration be given to issuing us with at least 4 permits that would give us an opportunity to move away from parking on Park Street and using other parts of the area. At the moment, our teachers have to leave the classroom to go and move their car every hour if they don't get a park on Park Street. And of course that compromises our ratios, it compromises the regulations of the Education Department. So it's a very stressful situation, and this has been going on for many years, and there's been several discussions with Council around improving our parking situation. So we're putting it forward again in the context of this streetscape review.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you for coming this evening, and thank you for your service more generally. I call upon Vicky Tutton, speaking to item 10.1.
Hi.
Oh, hi, Vicky. Sorry, it said you're in person here.
Yeah, no, I'm online. I've got 2 pre-age school kids that attended Lillian Kenham, and I live on
Vicky,
between.
if I could just get you to state your name and your suburb, that would be fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Vicky, who lives in South Melbourne, between Kingsway and Murray Street, on Park Street. So I live on Park Street.
Fantastic. Please feel free to go ahead.
Hello? Yeah. Yeah. So I live on Park Street. I support what Joe said. He's one of my representatives as a resident on Park Street. But I'm a parent of 2 preschool-aged kids who also attended Lillian Kenham, and I sit in the committee of Lillian Kenham. So that's why Gillian's there to give on the staff view, but also among the parents that attended the kinder have actually previously suggested could a lollipop sign be there, because the kinder is quite hidden, and a lot of the parents actually live between Kingsway and St Kilda Road, and I think there were other people earlier in this session has mentioned there are a lot of towers being built. And so we actually had a lot of parents that is living in those towers that come across to Kingsway and attend Lillian Kenham. And that crossing actually does not actually tell that they go to the kinder. So I think in my submission I mentioned that it would be great to have a zebra crossing between Eastern Road to the kinder. That would actually slow down the traffic a bit. And my second point was parking is one. There's very limited parking because in that area it's all residential, and the parents do not have much parking for even pickups and drop-offs. So I think I suggested a few 50-minute drop-off pickups around the area, either at residential or on Park Street. You could share this with the taxi stand that if you want to propose that. That's just on the kinder's point of view. And lastly, as a resident on particularly feel boxed because I'm currently parking my car on Park Street. I sometimes needed to park my car the other side of Park Street, which is on the kinder side of Park Street, coming from Kingsway to Murray Street. And it's sometimes pretty difficult to make a turn to cross the road that side. And I have to cross over to Kingsway or somewhere and wait in line in traffic or whatever. And with all this going on, I just feel boxed. So I just wish that council just think about the resident there and hope that they don't just box us, and also still leave some space for the resident to park.
Thank you, Vicky. I call upon Rhonda Small, speaking to item 13.2, which is Childcare Centres Improvement, Adjustment to Sale Timeframes. Rhonda, welcome. Just get you to state your name and your suburb, and your 3 minutes will start.
Yes, so my name is Rhonda Small. I live in St Kilda, just around the corner from the Eildon Road Children's Centre. Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. Sweden is well known for its provision of universal access to affordable early childcare and education. The model there is based on neighbourhood access to high-quality children's centres. As it happens, 2 of my children and 2 of my grandchildren have had experiences attending early childhood centres in Sweden. In 1987, when we lived in Malmö for a year, my son and daughter attended a local centre housed in a building from the 1500s. It was definitely an aged building, not built for childcare, and it was heritage protected. But the council had invested in renovations, expensive no doubt, to ensure childcare availability in that inner city neighbourhood, and it still operates today. Then in 2019, 2 of my grandkids spent a year in Lund with their families and also attended their neighbourhood centres. One was a small centre with no more than 25 children in 2 rooms, located in a house with access to a local playground in the old inner city area of Lund. My other grandchild was living in an outer area of Lund, where the local centre was much larger, with some 100 children spread across several rooms and located conveniently at the centre of their housing estate. My point here is that the council policy was to keep childcare centres operating in local neighbourhoods. That required flexibility, sometimes spending more on multiple small centres because without them there would be little access in densely populated inner areas with little available land for expansion. In other cases, new and often larger centres could be built where the opportunity arose on the city outskirts. I think flexibility and a commitment to invest in neighbourhood early children's centres is what is at stake here in Port Phillip, and both are what we as a community expect from our council. We also expect that before making major decisions on selling precious public land and closing precious community services, our councillors have at their disposal a comprehensive report on all the available options for preventing such sales and, if ultimately necessary, then also a plan for relocating the services. It is clear that such work was not completed before the intention to sell process was commenced for these 3 centres. And in my view, Council should focus now exclusively on investigating all options for retaining these 3 services and halt the sale process. For such investigations are really only beginning now. Council resolved at its last meeting that the CEO would bring a report to tonight's meeting with advice on the need to extend the proposed timeframe for the sale process and on funding discussions held to date with the state and federal governments with likely timelines. Why does the report only address extended timelines for the sale of Eildon Road? Why is there no detail on the discussions held to date with state and federal government with a forward timeframe for council consideration of future options?
Thanks, Rhonda. I get you come to the end, please.
I will. Just one more sentence. Perhaps most importantly, why have these closures been proposed in the absence of a Children's Services implementation plan as promised in the Every Child Our Future policy, approved by Council in 2019 and which came into effect in July 2020? Thank you.
No, thank you. I call upon Brenda Forbath, also speaking to item 13.2. Thank you. Welcome. Brenda, if you just try one more time on the button there, that'd be great. Yeah, I think we're good.
Is that better?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Brenda Forbath from Elwood. Thank you, councillors. And yes, I'm speaking to item 13.2. Now, the report seems to continue with its intention to sell the 3 community-managed childcare centres in St Kilda, Elwood and Balaclava, despite the widespread outrage in the community. And I want to point out to councillors that once lost, these buildings and locations can never be recovered. As with the school closures in the Kennedy era, and some of you might remember that period back in the early 1990s, the inner suburbs of Melbourne have now found it very difficult and expensive to acquire land to build new schools. This same scenario is in danger of being played out again with the closure of these 3 childcare centres. While the report before Council tonight refers to exploration of funding possibilities with state and federal governments to undertake building works at these centres, and as it should be, there is no indication in the report that Council intends to put money on the table in a cost-sharing arrangement. So this leads to my first question. As to why the $9.2 million listed in the Council budget under the Childcare Infrastructure Reserve line has not been drawn on to undertake both maintenance works and structural work to make the centres compliant with disability access requirements. Secondly, there appears to be a discrepancy between what is being stated on the Have Your Say site about the amount actually in the Childcare Infrastructure Reserve. They say it's 6.2 million, and the budget figure of 9.2 million. So there's a missing 3 million there. Has 3 million in fact been spent on childcare centres in less than a year? And if so, what has it been spent on? Thank you.
Pardon me. Thank you. We didn't get those questions beforehand, did we? Are you able to respond? Otherwise, do you want to take a bit of time, perhaps? Gather your thoughts.
Through you, Mayor, we only got them just before the meeting, but I'm happy to clarify that the 1 July 2021 open...
No worries. Respond as best you can, and if you do have some more time to get some better answers, then please feel free to use it.
Okay. So what I can say from the Council Plan and Budget is that the 1 July 2021 opening balance, so where we started this year, or we're forecast to start this year, for the Childcare Infrastructure Reserve is 6.2 million. That's in the Council Plan and Budget and is in alignment with the information on the Have Your Say site. There are some assumptions around potential forecast increases in that over time, but it depends on Council's childcare improvement scheme and other spending throughout the year. At this stage, we are proposing to spend, and we have been spending some small amounts on from the Childcare Infrastructure Levy Fund towards improvements to the buildings and also to some of the fencing to ensure it's compliant. I haven't got those figures in front of me.
That's fine. And councillors, given most of the others to item 13.2 have questions in front of you, I might get you to take those up in councillor question time, or when we get to the reports, obviously. I now move to calling upon Claire Byrne, speaking to item 13.2 again. Claire, welcome. Just get you to state your name and your suburb, please.
Claire Byrne, St Kilda West. I'm the Chair of Committee of Management at Elwood Children's Centre, which most of you will know by now. Throughout this intention to sell process, I've heard many times the need for any reinvestment in these buildings to represent value for money. We have seen and heard many times at the property team's assessment of what value our buildings represent. But what we don't hear too much about is the other measures of value for our centres, and I'm here tonight to speak to that value. Of course, I can't talk about this value without noting that these centres provide a vital service to the community in the provision of high quality and affordable care for our youngest citizens. Equally, the availability of high quality and affordable childcare improves participation in the workforce, which in turn means that locals have money to spend in your local economy. But tonight I also want to talk about the other services our centres provide to this community. All three centres are managed by a volunteer group of working parents, so the management of these centres doesn't cost council a cent. As one of these volunteers, I can tell you that is most definitely value for money, especially lately. We've also have volunteers working on fundraising committees and now volunteers working on this very proposal. At Elwood Children's Centre, almost half of our educators reside in the city of Port Phillip, so our centres are employing your residents. We take on work experience placements from local high schools and placements for those undertaking early childhood qualifications. Our centres represent a major contributor to social connection in your community through many events. At Elwood, this includes welcome and end-of-year picnics, building important connections between families, community movie nights, publicly attended trivia nights at local venues, barbecues at the neighbourhood house, and prior to the pandemic, a free food pantry open to local residents. This connection to community extends into our curriculum, with our kinder rooms undertaking community walks and visits to local venues. It should be noted that not only do these events foster connections between locals and build your community, they also contribute to the local economy. During the pandemic, our fundraising committee were faced with a significant challenge when event after event after event was cancelled, but they pivoted brilliantly and they came up with the idea of Elwood bingo cards, a scavenger hunt throughout Elwood, an initiative sold to families and the public, encouraging local residents to get out and about during their allowed exercise during lockdown. These cards fostered connection and well-being during a time when this was hard to come by. The community and social connections built by these centres is invaluable, none more so than during the last 2 years of the pandemic, when the importance of connections within your 5 km zone became critically important. When councillors hear the term value for money when considering whether it is worth reinvesting in these centres, I urge you to remember the value these centres represent to your community and your local economy. Thanks very much.
No, thank you. I call upon Caroline Thornton speaking to item 13.2. Thank you for coming. Just get you to state your name and your suburb again, please. Thank you so much.
Caroline Thornton from St Kilda. Thank you, Mayor and councillors. I'm the president of the Eildon Road Childcare and Kindergarten, also named in council documents as Eildon Road Children's Centre. I am speaking to agenda item 13.2, Childcare Centres Improvement Adjustment to Sale timeframe. The agenda paper makes reference on 4 occasions to the settlement date of 17 Eildon Road moving to the end of 2023 from the end of 2022. However, under recommendation 3.6, it reads, Council notes that if, following consultation, Council determines to sell the properties, the indicative timeline proposes that 17 Eildon Road be offered for sale first as the first asset to be sold in the second quarter of 2022. I can't believe an agenda document would make it to this point with a typographical error as significant as this. Are we to believe there's been no change to the sale date proposed and there's now going to be an 18-month settlement period? Our Committee of Management believed the intention of the adjustment to the sale timeframe was to allow Council appropriate time to rigorously and possibly even collaboratively explore all viable options to sale. We believe the councillors who proposed the adjustment also aimed to bide time to explore options vigorously. After reading this agenda paper, our families and community are left feeling more than ever there is no intention from Council to explore options for the sale of our centre, If the proposal is to move the settlement date by 12 months to December 2023...
Just get you to come to the end if you could.
Why on earth wouldn't Council also move the sale date by 12 months to mid-2023? Thank you.
No, thank you, and we will take that question up when we get there. I call upon Mark Leslie speaking to item 13.2. Welcome, Mark. Just get you to state your name and your suburb. That'd be fantastic.
Thank you. Mark Leslie. I live in St Kilda. I'm the Treasurer at Eildon Road Childcare and Kindergarten. Thank you to the others who have spoken before me on this agenda item. On behalf of the 3 centres, I'd like to thank the councillors for their recent site visits and engagements on the matter. And tonight I just wanted to talk a little bit about on process. We continue to be disappointed by the way the process has been managed, especially as it relates to communication of key pieces of information and engagement with our centres and the community. For 17 Eildon Road, our primary concern is that, firstly, unsubstantiated and potentially false information continues to be put out into the public domain, creating enormous stress and anxiety for staff and families. Comments that explicitly state there are structural issues with the building and there's a threat to the safety of staff and children are alarmist and misleading. Secondly, and related to this, there is information that has not been communicated to the centres, such as building reports and even the specifics of the amendment tonight, which Caroline touched on, which is making it very challenging for us to participate in this process in a constructive way. We've recently learned that the commissioned structural engineering report dated December 6, 2021 was not provided. We then asked for this via the Have Your Say portal, and we're really disappointed that our questions continue to be taken down. 48 hours ago we received this report, and the report concludes, and I quote, "Whilst overall the building is in good structural condition, there are some structural and other issues that require attention. This finding is not consistent with the messages that are being put out in the public domain, and we need that to stop." Thirdly, there's very little two-way dialogue between the council officers and representatives from the centres. We've had one facilitated session that did not fulfil its objectives. And finally, our fear is that you, the councillors, are not being provided with a full picture, which may put you in a compromising position when it comes to fulfilling your more holistic obligations to the community, leaving you at risk of making a decision that is not in the best interest of the community and may lead to significant reputational damage. So my question is, on process, will you consider halting the process to sell the centres, providing you with the time to establish the appropriate process and governance that will allow you to fulfil your duty as elected council members? Thanks for your time.
No, thank you, Mark. I call upon Sarah Roth speaking to item 13.2 also.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening. Just get you to state your name again and your suburb, please.
Sarah Roth. I'm from St Kilda, and I'm also a member of the Committee of Management of the Eildon Road Childcare and Kindergarten. In recognition of the huge impact of proposed sale of the childcare and kindergarten properties has had on the local community, Council has extended its community consultation period twice to allow ample time for centres and concerned residents to respond. Now submissions have closed. Can councillors please clarify their detailed strategy to review all of these submissions and outline what safeguards are in place to ensure that council is presented with unbiased, objective and complete data from the community feedback submitted through Have Your Say? And could council please also detail how it will continue to further engage with the centres in the next phases of this process? Yes, and finally, I would like to use this opportunity to formally invite councillors to meet with the committees of management of our centres and discuss our Have Your Say submissions in more detail. Thank you.
No, thank you for joining us this evening. I call upon Rebecca Sanders speaking to item 13.2. Rebecca, can you hear us?
I can, hello.
And we can hear you loud and clear. Just get you to state your name and your suburb, please.
Sure, Rebecca Sanders of Elwood. I'm a parent at the Elwood Children's Centre. So obviously talking to the intention to sell the 3 childcare buildings. Last night we had our facilitated workshop with council. I want to first say thank you to Tony, Anthony, Felicity, Rhonda and Tom, who all attended last night. It was the third of the different centres, and based on the feedback of the first 2 centres, I believe we were able to get a much more meaningful opportunity to ask questions and understand the council's position. In this session, we heard hints of a more macro childcare budget issue for the council. This had never been shared in full before. Instead, council focused on suggesting our centres needed to close because the buildings were beyond reasonable repair, which has since been clarified is not necessarily the case. It seems from some of the answers I pieced together from council last night and through other meetings and submissions that the macro situation is that the council has 12 centres, most needing work in the next 10 years. They also need to address a supply and demand issue at Fisherman's Bend. They have $6.2 million in their building fund, and I have made a very presumable guess at it sounds like from what I've seen that we're looking at about 30 million to 40 million of works for the council to successfully upgrade in the next 10 years their 12 centres and address supply and demand issues in Fisherman's Bend with new facilities. They're trying to, it sounded like from last night that the council is trying to negotiate 10 years worth of state funding and not actually specific funding for these 3 centres. But state funding will obviously require co-contribution. So it sounds like it's likely that Council needs to find 10 to 15 million to match the best case scenario of states funding 50% of all works. Rather than finding extra funds, it sounds like that from their own budget, it sounds like Council have decided to put forward the proposal to sell the 3 properties to help them to fund what they need for their full portfolio. Is this accurate, and can details of the macro issue be shared? It seems publicly Council is speaking about 3 centres, but privately and to state government they are making decisions at a portfolio level. We have been asked to come up with suggestions, but the macro context would be imperative to us making sure that we're bringing forward realistic suggestions for the problem at hand for Council and councillors.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I now call upon Louise Hurd speaking to item 13.2. Louise, can you hear us?
Hi, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Just get you to state your name and your suburb, please. Thank you so much.
So, Louise Hurd, I'm the president of the Avenue Children's Centre and Kindergarten in Balaclava. Obviously, I'm here to talk about the current process concerning the potential sale of the 3 early learning centres, and I thank all the other committee members from the other centres that have spoken prior to me tonight. In November last year, with the 3 hours notice that we got before this proposal became public, Council indicated that we would receive support, in inverted commas, during this process. Given the obvious impact the announcement of this potential sale would have on staff retention, family retention and new enrolments. Recently, Mr Keenan indicated that no support had been given because no decision had been made. This ignores the significant impact the announcement of this process has had on each of our centres. To date, no support has been given. We continue to pay for maintenance and infrastructure upgrades we know the Council are unlikely to ever complete at our centre. My question to councillors is, will you formally consider reducing the levies payable by the 3 centres while this process is concluded and while we operate in an environment where the messages being sent by Council indicate that they intend to sell? Thank you.
And a councillor may take those questions on notice when we get to the item. That concludes the in-person and virtual questions. We've received further submissions to be read out on behalf of members of the public. I'll call a name of each member of the public and refer to the Manager of Governance and Organisational Performance to read the summary of the submissions. The first one comes from Adrian Jackson.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. The question reads, why is another noisy outdoor concert scheduled for 5 March between 12 noon and 10 p.m. in Catani Gardens? Music promoters can make a profit at $169 per ticket at ratepayers' expense who have to suffer the noise all day and evening. Is the income to council derived from these concerts worth the attack on our residents' peaceful amenity? Why are St Kilda West and Middle Park residents forced to suffer council's direction that they are helping the St Kilda economically, which is not true? Why should Catani Gardens be closed off for private concerts so local residents and picnic visitors cannot fully use the garden in peace? Why does council favour St Kilda, which is only part of Port Phillip? St Kilda has 2 closely located shopping strips, Ackland Street and Fitzroy Street, and Fitzroy Street has been a failure for decades, so why doesn't Council rezone Fitzroy Street for residential apartments and concentrate on Ackland Street for retail, cafes, etc.?
Thank you for the question. I'll call upon Kylie Bennett to answer that for us.
Through you, Mayor, holding events within the municipality brings a multitude of benefits, including direct expenditure with local businesses, increased tourism and visitation, opportunities for our creative sector and practitioners, and cultural opportunities for the community as audience members and attendees. Events staged within Port Phillip in turn support a range of other industries, including hospitality, tourism, live music, and a range of creative industries. Support for events and these industries is a commitment made through the council plan, the existing events strategy of council, as well as the creative and prosperous city strategy. Economic recovery for our municipality, including all activity centres and our creative industries, is a priority for council.
Thank you. And I just realised I missed a late submission for a question to council. So before I move on to the next written question, I'll just call upon John Brooksmith to ask a question of council. John, thanks for being patient and waiting for us.
That's right. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I asked this question...
Just get you to state your name and your suburb.
John Brooksmith. I live in Middle Park. I have been for 20 years.
Great,
I asked this question vaguely in the last meeting, and I asked Councillor Sirikoff to forward the details to the council and have them respond. They told me that was out of order, and they had no intention of responding to the details because the questions...
All right, let's just get to the question, and we'll make sure it's in order.
Okay, the question is the question about the 75B Beaconsfield Parade, the Sandbar Restaurant. It's been a thorn in the side of the residents for some time. The subject land is Crown freehold.
John, if I just ask you to slow down a little, if that's okay.
Okay,
just
sorry.
So we can understand.
The subject address is Crown foreshore leasehold and subject to state government management lease to the City of Port Phillip. The lease shows the plan of subject area and clearly forbids any use of the land on Beaconsfield Parade. Alleged breaches, rubbish. On each side of this leased land, there's a public pathway to the public toilets.
John, if you just be a little bit respectful about, I know you're using alleged breaches, but let's just be cognizant of what we're saying. So let's ask a question of council within our powers if we could, and if you just slow down so we can clearly understand, that would be great.
Okay. There are a number of rubbish bins on the foreshore in Beaconsfield Parade there. They're permanently there, even though the council forbids them from being there.
Okay.
The lease is for land. It is clearly defined in a lease in a plan. The place occupies more of it, and it's very difficult to get to the toilets.
Okay.
There are functions held there. The planning permit addresses functions, limits noise, and the number of patrons, limits the level of amplified noise, and the type of parties there. Window of my house cracked not long ago during one of the parties. The planning permit forbids any noise to be heard inside the residence opposite, and that is clearly not the case.
Okay.
Patronage. The planning permit has inside 92 patrons, outside 60 patrons, a total of 152 patrons. The liquor licence is 137 patrons, outside 231 patrons, and 368 patrons in total. This area is a residential area. Also, the planning permit 1186/2000C, it was a requirement of the planning permit that a condition C, there was meant to be a patron management plan. The council told me there is no patron management plan.
Okay.
Either the council has misplaced it, or the permit is invalid. This problem has been going on for years, and council seems to not want to do anything about it. Since I've written this question, I've had an email from Lisa Davis, and she tells me that the planning, the venue is totally in compliance with the permit. I would suggest it is not.
Okay, just if I could ask a follow-up question of you. Obviously, you've got noise complaints. Have those complaints been conveyed to council in the past?
They have been complained to council many times.
Great, thank you, John.
Very little has been done about it.
We'll take that on notice, but I think I've got most of it here in terms of bins on the streets, the hours of operation. Thank you, John. Thank you, John.
I sent the copy to Emily. She has a copy.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Oh, that's most useful then. Okay, so we'll take that on notice if that's okay, which I think everyone agrees with, and come back to you. So thank you again for your patience. I appreciate that. Now we have another question from Adrian Jackson. If I get the Manager of Governance and Operational Performance to read that for us, that'd be great.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. The use of the word botanical in the name of St Kilda Botanical Gardens is old-fashioned and a mouthful to say. Will Council bring the garden's name into line with other gardens like the nearby Royal Botanic Gardens, Melbourne, and change botanical to botanic? The modified name suggested being St Kilda Botanic Gardens.
I call upon Claire Stevens to help us with the answer to that question.
Through you, Mayor, the naming rules for places in Victoria set out step-by-step information on naming, renaming and changing the boundaries of roads, features and localities in Victoria. Any public or private road, feature or locality can be named, renamed or have its boundary changed using the principles, requirements and procedures in those naming rules. Using those naming rules, this proposal would have to be supported by Council and would be subject to a public submission process Mr Jackson is welcome to submit a formal application to Council to rename the garden.
Thank you for that. There's two subsequent questions that Adrian Jackson has asked, which I'm ruling out of order. Is probably a bit of a too strong word, but that's what the law says. One of which I'm deeming doesn't fit within the realm of council responsibility, and that's the third question. And the fourth question has been submitted in the same form or a similar form previously on two other occasions, and I'm of the view it's been sufficiently answered. I'll now move to a question to be read out on a person's behalf in relation to item 10.1 again, and that's on behalf of Don Keat.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. As a long-term resident of more than 20 years in the City of Port Phillip and an avid cyclist, I'm very much in support of the proposed streetscape improvement proposed for Park Street. Having been a resident of City Edge Stage 4 and now a resident of Domain Hill, the proposed improvements and the inclusion of cycle lanes are welcome additions to what has been a very dangerous section of the road for cyclists between Kingsway and St Kilda Road. The upgrading of the tram stop to a super stop removed the majority of street parking and narrowed the roadway to a single vehicle width. I do not support cyclists using pavements, but at times that this is the only option for cyclists during peak periods when that section of Park Street is gridlocked with traffic. With the completion of Anzac Station, I expect cycle traffic to increase on Park Street, as it will be a major corridor to the new station from the areas of west of Kingsway, and protecting the safety of cyclists should be a priority. Melbourne has a great track record for introducing cycle lanes, shared pathways and bicycle tracks all over Melbourne, and has encouraged the use of bicycles to reduce emissions in an already congested city. Providing a safe route to Anzac Station will help protect cyclists and encourage their use. Additionally, cycle lanes are increasingly being used by e-bikes, e-scooters and other e-mobile devices. Keeping them off the roads and pavements is essential. They are capable of rapid acceleration and drivers are often not looking out for them. I have also seen collisions between e-devices and pedestrians. In summary, I fully support the proposed improvements to Park Street.
Thank you very much. And finally, we have a submission from Karen Baines of South Melbourne. If you could kindly read that out for us.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. My name is Karen Baines and I reside in South Melbourne. The report prepared by officers is very comprehensive, with findings indicating clear support within the community for the project proceeding. The proposal for ongoing consultation with Park Street Towers and Department of Transport to achieve further improvements in design is supported. I submit there is an overwhelming need for the second east-west bike path additional to Albert Road and Park Street. An alternate proposal to Park Street for cyclists to be directed along the proposed Route K from St Kilda Road behind McRobb School to Murray Street wrongfully assumes riders are primarily through riders and not local. The K route will not service Anzac Station, sub-precincts 2 and 4 of the St Kilda Road North, which Park Street bike path will. The current trial of e-scooters in Port Phillip clearly demonstrates the need to expand the number of safe cycle paths in this area. There are over 1,500 bicycle bays accommodated in the known developments proposed close to or on Park Street. This will result in a substantial increase of cyclists using Park Street. The approved developments at 200 Wells Street and 374 to 384 St Kilda Road, both on the corner of Park Street, will accommodate 343 bicycles, and the near complete development at 343 Park Street, another 167 bicycles alone, totalling 500. As the planning scheme no longer requires car spaces to be provided for one-bedroom apartments, it is expected the bicycle use will be the norm for those living in these apartments in sub-precincts 2 and 4. Successful strip shopping areas with narrow footpaths include Carlisle Street and Ormond Road, whereby there is an eclectic mix of activities. The proposed Cobden Street pocket parklet will provide an expanded area for outdoor activities abutting several developments whereby proposed cafes are located. The Park Street design provides a very good solution and balance between the needs and the requirements of all users.
Great job, and thank you very much. Councillors, we now move to item 5, which is councillor question time. Do you have any questions that you would like to raise this evening? I have one, and feel free to take this on notice because I gave you no prior notice, and I don't think you've got an answer, but I'll just ask it anyway. Can officers provide any details of the impact on the proposed third runway at Melbourne Airport and the impact on Port Phillip residents? Is Council making a submission to the consultation process? CEO, you want to take that on notice? Great, thank you. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Clark, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This was raised via the MAV and CIV recent discussions, and the question is, would it be possible to have an opt-in charge box on the rates so that people can tick the box saying they voluntarily support climate change initiatives, and it could have a value of $50 or $100 or something that could be chosen?
Okay, CEO, who do we go to? Chris Carroll, would you be able to assist us? We'll take that on notice, Councillor Clark. Is the officers clear on the question? Yep. Great job. Thank you. Let's move from item 5 now to item 6, which is the sealing schedule. There's no items to be sealed at this evening's meeting, so we will move to item 7, which is petition and joint letters. Councillors, we have 3 petitions tonight. Let's start with petition 7, or item 7.1, which is the petition to keep street gardening growing in the city of Port Phillip. The 2 officers looking after this one are Dana Pritchard and Tony Keenan. Do councillors have any questions in relation of the officers also? Sorry, do councillors have any questions of the officers in relation to this item? Okay, is there a mover for the item? Councillor Copsey to move, Councillor Consolo to second. Councillor Copsey, please go ahead.
I'll just reserve.
Terrific. Councillor Consolo, would you like to speak as seconder?
Sure. I've heard a lot of passionate interest in this topic. This petition is by far the largest I've ever seen, with I think it was 5,000. This process is clearly not over, and I look forward to seeing the next version and continue to engage with the community to get it right.
Thank you, Councillor Consolo. Councillor Martin.
This has been one of the more interesting months to have as a councillor. I've received so many comments from people who have comments, I was going to say concerns, we'll call them comments about the draft guidelines that went out. I'm sure that with the consultation that's been taking place, the final version of these guidelines are going to be brilliant. There have been some fantastic suggestions that have been made by some of our members of the public. Not all of them will be able to be accepted, of course, on things like OH&S grounds, but I think out of the consultation process we're going to come up with a very, very, very good document that celebrates a lot of the existing gardens while giving clear guidance to those people who want to start some new ones, and I thank all those people who have been involved in the consultation process.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Who else would like to speak to this? Councillor Clark, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I probably haven't been as close to this as some councillors through their resident discussions, and however this document seems to be overly complicated for the general residents who merely want to plant some plants and beautify their local nature strip or local areas. I realise there are some safety issues that we need to take care of, but I'm looking forward to this new policy being a lot more pragmatic about what the community can do. And I belatedly realised that the plants I planted under my nearby plane tree would apparently breach this new policy as well, which seemed to be rather harmless. So, as I said, I'm hoping we can find some sensible pathway through this to keep what's the best of what the community is trying to achieve. And hopefully I don't have to dig up my plants either. And I look forward to seeing what the officers come back with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. There's no one else wishing to speak. Over to you, Councillor Copsey.
I think my colleagues have said it all. Thank you.
I put that motion to you, councillors. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Let's move now to petitions item 7.2, which is the petition to introduce bylaws to stop hooning on our streets. Councillors, questions of the officers, please. I have one. I was just wondering if Council has received a formal request to change bylaws from the police in relation to hoon driving at all.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Brian T.
Council has not received a formal request from police to introduce bylaws.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Councillor Martin.
I note that we've looked at some of the bylaws that have come from some other councils. I also know that the people in the Beacon Cove area are very, very concerned about what they believe is hooning in the Waterfront Place area. I'm not sure that the definition of hooning that has been applied in some other areas would apply exactly to the sort of behaviour that occurs at Waterfront Place. So perhaps Mr T or someone else can answer. Are the bylaws that we've seen from other councils appropriate to manage some of the behaviours at Waterfront Place, or would we need to look at some other issues such as traffic control measures to address those issues?
Brian T.
Through you, Mayor. We'll seek to address the issues in relation to the applicability of the bylaws as part of our council response. So effectively, through you, Mayor, if I could take that on notice as part of the development of our response.
Thank you. No further questions. I'm looking for a mover of this motion or something alternate. Thanks, Councillor Copsey and Councillor Consolo to second. Go ahead, Councillor Copsey.
I'll reserve again.
Councillor Consolo.
All right. Okay. Thank you for this petition. It's a popular topic. We've had probably the most petitions in topic on hooning. Therefore, this demonstrates there's more to do. I welcome further briefings and reports on this topic for voting at a future meeting. We still have a lot of questions and information and support out there that we need to clarify. That will come in the report. So right now we're voting about accepting the petition, and that'll come back at a future meeting. I would like to also see this as a more holistic approach, and that we look at more design considerations.
Thanks, Councillor Consolo. I'll speak quickly just to thank Josh Burns MP for putting this petition on behalf of 199 people through, and as Councillor Consolo has mentioned, this will be coming for further consideration at a future council meeting. Any further councillors? Councillor Clark, please feel free to go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. It's surprising to see a federal MP getting involved with these kind of things, but I guess it is an election year. I'm supportive of all options being considered and reviewed, and like Councillor Consolo said, considering the broader implications and also understanding through briefings and meetings what we can do. We've had several other petitions that we've received in my short time on council, and we've received very strong feedback from the community regarding this, and I think we need to investigate all options. And there's some that might pose some concerns, but that's what the further discussions and information that council officers will be providing us, because the community is clearly impacted severely by this, and we need to find some solutions for them, which could include design, but also whether bylaws are appropriate or not. So I look forward to receiving that report back from council officers.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Bond, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will be supporting this particular motion because it's just receiving the petition. But I will caution the petitioners that the introduction of bylaws by the City of Port Phillip in itself will not address the problem here. The problem will only be addressed if existing laws and any new bylaws that were to come in would be enforced. A few years ago we had a situation where this council pretty much ripped itself apart over drinking laws on our streets. We're all on various sides of that particular argument on whether or not we should ban drinking across the municipality, which was requested of us by our local police. In the end, those laws were passed. But I must say, since the introduction of those laws, I have been very disappointed with the way those bylaws have been enforced, because I very much doubt they have been enforced, And the situation with drinking on our streets, particularly in Fitzroy Street and Ackland Street, is as bad as it's ever been, even though we have these magical laws in place that a few years ago were meant to fix the problem. So whilst residents may think that all they have to do is lobby council and get council to change its bylaws and the problem will be fixed, well, that's probably the easy bit. The hard bit is getting these laws enforced by the police if they do choose to ever request additional hooning bylaws from us. And we're finding that with our alcohol bylaws that were introduced years ago, the enforcement of that has been very substandard to date. And the problem is not going away because of the lack of enforcement in this particular area. So just a word of warning that anyone that thinks that new bylaws are going to be the solution or the ultimate solution here with hooning in Port Phillip.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bond. Councillor Sirikoff, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to note that Council does currently have on trial for 6 months a mobile CCTV to monitor and catch those people who are hooning from one end of Port Phillip to the other, from Elwood to Port Melbourne. It has had some success, and we are getting fewer calls from the public, which was noted in the CEO's report a fortnight ago. And I'm really pleased that that's having success. But I also welcome the exploration of what else we can do for council in case we don't end up maintaining or purchasing a mobile CCTV. So I'd like to see council looking at all avenues so we can have some peace and quiet on our streets. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sirikoff. Before I go back to the move, would anyone else like to speak to the petition? Over to you, Councillor Copsey. They've taken your words away from you again. Councillors, I'll now put that motion to you. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. I'll move to item 7.3. After that, we'll take a quick break. Just a bit of foreshadow there. Petition against lost car parking in Park Street. This petition was received by Council yesterday, and the CEO has agreed to include it in accordance with the governance rules here this evening. So, Council, it's tabled in front of you. The officers may like to put the recommendation as soon as possible on the screen so it's clear and transparent what we're looking at here this evening. Do I need to read the petition out? I don't think we do we? No. Okay. Well, obviously it's put back on the website, so we don't need to do that. And councillors have been provided the petition with sufficient time to read and understand it as required. Let's check the date. So under item 2, notes that on the 1st of September 2021, seems we have a few issues. So if we move that as a minor amendment, I'm sure the mover and seconder would be happy to do that. Is it 2021 or 2022? Well, it's past tense in the wording. Anyone got any advice on this one? Anyway, I'll get it moving, and then I'm sure we can move that as a minor amendment as required. Any questions on that 2021? Thank you, Brian T. Any questions on this petition to council? Okay, I'll ask for a mover of the motion.
I'm sorry, but what is the petition? I organised that petition.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joe. I think it's a reasonable thing to suggest. I might adjourn the meeting, we'll have a rest, but I think it might be a reasonable thing to put up the petition wording before we actually put the motion up and have it on the screen. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to do, given that we've just accepted it. So I'll take an adjournment between now and 8 at 21:22, councillors, so 7 or 8 minutes, just have a bit of rest, stretch your legs, and I'll request officers to put the wording of the petition 7.3 on the screen. Thank you. Just for putting petition 7.3 there on the projector so it can clearly be seen. Those of you who are viewing it online can also find this on the council papers page also. So we've done questions. I'll just give one opportunity. Any further questions in relation to item 7.3? There being no further questions, I ask for a mover of the officer's recommendation or something different. Thank you, Councillor Copsey. Seconder, please. Councillor Bond, thank you. Councillor Copsey.
All right, I'll speak to this one. Just noting that we've received this petition and included it on the agenda tonight, and that all that we are doing this evening is noting the petition and asking officers to consider it and provide a response at a future meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Any further? Thank you, Councillor Consola. Go ahead. Of course you can. Clarifying question of the motion.
Yeah, clarifying question, I guess. With this petition, it says that we will get a response at a future date, but because we're voting on an item about this tonight, and I can see that that's why we're brought in as a late item, is there anything that the officers can say about the car parking spaces in relation to some plans, any changes or anything that might be relevant?
Yeah, allow that. That's a fair question. Brian T., take your time.
Through you, Mayor.
Thanks.
In terms of the petition raises effectively two issues. The first being a concern about the loss of parking bays for residents. And in response to that, officers propose that the four existing bays that are allocated to taxi zones will be removed, and that no limit parking spaces adjacent to the Eastern Roads Reserve will be moved from no limit to 2-hour or short-term parking spaces, and that means that they'll then be available for residential permit holders. So this means that there will be no net loss of resident parking permit bays as part of this project. The petition also raises the concern associated with the dangers of accessing parked cars, and the design currently provides a 1 metre buffer between parked cars and the bike lane. This is in line with current design standards. The proposed bike lane is actually slightly wider than the minimum lengths required to support bike passing. So what officers propose to do is to reduce the width of the bike lanes and to increase the buffers between cars and the bike lanes, providing additional width for unloading and accessing parked cars.
Thanks, Brian T. Follow up from Councillor Consolo.
Follow up on that. Do you have the distance then from the curb to the car, if you have that buffer and the lane, what that would be?
Brian T.
I've got the width of the wide buffer is currently 1 metre. I don't have the width of the bike lanes, sorry.
Do we have any officers online, Brian? Shay, etc. We can pad it out a bit so we can get an answer if you want.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, thanks for that opportunity to receive further instructions. I can advise that it's approximately 3 metres is the width.
From the curb to the car, that is, or is that the bike path? Just to be clear. I presume it's the curb to the car.
I'm just checking, or if we've got...
Is Shay on the line at all? Shay, Tom, can you hear us?
Or Tom, I think, Tom Mason.
Tom?
Through you, Mayor.
Welcome.
Tom's here, yeah, I can answer that question. So at the moment, the bike lane is currently designed to be 2 metres for the majority of the length. In some sections, it's actually 2.5 metres. So that additional 0.5 metres is the sections that we're looking at in minimising it back to that 2 metre width. And where we can achieve that metre buffer that applies across the entire length from this section can be widened to 1.5 metres.
And Brian, just to clarify, one of Councillor Consolo's questions, that it says a report will come back to Council. She obviously mentioned report 10.1 this evening, which covers off on a number of items. Is there another report coming out after this one this evening?
We'll formally respond to the petition, so it'll be that report that will come back to councillors, which will be our response to the petition.
Yeah, I guess that's why we've put it on tonight's agenda, obviously, otherwise it would be considered, which is 100% the right thing to do. Councillors, any further questions? Sorry, we're in the middle of it anyway, so I shouldn't be asking you for questions. No, that's fine. It's a good process to go through. No problem. I didn't write down a mover and a seconder. So, Councillor Copsey, did you move? Congratulations. Councillor Bond, you seconded. Okay. Who else would like to speak to the item? Councillor Consolo? No. Anybody else? Councillor Copsey, you wish to close? No. Okay, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Now move to items 8 through 13, which is the presentation of reports. Are there any questions of the officers in relation to item 8.1, which is the presentation of issue number 83 of the CEO report? Councillor Martin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr CEO, I see that Council has won what's called a Waste Management Initiative Award. Can you tell us very briefly what the background to this is and what it means for our council?
Thanks, Councillor Martin. CEO?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I might ask Lachlan Johnson to provide that answer if he's online.
Lachlan was here before, wasn't he? No.
Hi.
No problem. Is anyone else able to add some colour to this for us? Otherwise, we'll take that one on notice. Thanks, Councillor Martin. You've bowled them. Any further questions in relation to item 8.1? No, I'm looking for a mover for the report, councillors. Councillor Martin, thank you for doing that again. And Councillor Pearl, second. Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
As I say every month, this is my favourite document. It's great to see the outstanding things that we do here at the City of Port Phillip, along with some of the problems that we have along the way. And I was delighted, for example, to see this award that we won, and I look forward to learning a little bit more. I also commend to anyone out there in cyberspace, the document looks at Council's finances in great detail. It's most informative. I commend it to everyone.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. Any further councillors wish to speak? I take it you don't wish to close, Councillor Martin? No, I put that report to you to be accepted. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. I now move to item 10.1, Park Street Streetscape Improvement Project Consultation Outcomes. Councillors, questions of the officers in relation to 10.1. 10.1, 8.1 was the CEO report, yep. No problem. Take your time. Go ahead, Councillor Consolo.
Thank you. The section on Park Street between Murray and Kingsway, where the idea is this pop-up bike lane, is right now the speed limit is 60 kilometres per hour. Is it proposed to reduce this to 40 kilometres per hour?
Thanks, Brian T.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. The section is currently 60 kilometres an hour and the proposal is to reduce that to 40 kilometres per hour.
Thanks, Brian T. No further questions in relation to the report. I'm looking for a mover of the officer's recommendation or something else in relation to 10.1. I've got Councillor Copsey to move and Councillor Bond to second. Thank you, Councillor Copsey, for doing that, and feel free to speak to the item.
Thank you. I want to thank all of the community who have participated in the engagement on this project. It's been a project that's elicited a lot of different views from the community, but it's no doubt that we can achieve a vastly better streetscape in Park Street than what is there currently. A lot of what is focused on in the engagement report and in the engagement that was done has sort of focused on for and against around various aspects of this, but I'm very, very confident that as we move to detailed design and construction, we're ultimately going to be getting a much better outcome eventually in this area for all road users. I think it's going to lead to enhanced pedestrian safety, a more pleasant experience moving through the street with the increased net increase of planting along the street there as well. And importantly, we're going to wind up with a much safer street overall once these changes are progressed and implemented. So I'm very pleased that we've moved to this. It's been quite a journey for the Park Street Streetscape Improvement Project, but I think it's one where councillors have really appreciated the in-depth feedback that has been provided by the community. It certainly has contributed to councillors' discussions and debates on the issue. For me, I come to this from the perspective I would have preferred to see the initial design progress to detailed design. I think that it led to greater safety outcomes and so on, but I think that what we've come to through the process of engaging with the community and then officers responding to that feedback is a really overall improved outcome for the street. So I'm very excited that we're moving forward and want to thank everybody who has participated in the engagements. It's helped us basically make sure that this is crafted for the neighbourhood and is going to result in better outcomes for all users.
Thanks, Councillor Copsey. Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. When this particular proposal came to us previously, I wasn't satisfied with one particular element of the proposal, and that was the parking and loading. It had the previous proposal had a nice wide footpath. It had a gold-plated bike path, but it had no parking and loading. And as a result, I was of the belief that people who needed to get to these buildings and get to these businesses that are located in this particular section of Park Street would just park either in the bike path or park on the footpath and do that anyway. So at a previous council meeting, we asked council officers to go away and come back with a design that adequately provided for parking and loading and unloading bays in this particular stretch that would allow this particular stretch of street to function. The reality is we're trying to fit into this particular area. Everyone, if you listen to all the submitters tonight, we want to fit a bike lane, we want to fit a nice wide footpath, and we want to fit parking and loading into this area. And the street just isn't wide enough in sections where you have that tram stop in order to enable all three of those elements to be installed. And that's the reality. And if we were to pick two out of three of those elements, and wouldn't matter which combination of the three we were to put in there, the street just wouldn't function because it just wouldn't satisfactorily cater for parking and loading, it wouldn't satisfactorily cater for pedestrians, or wouldn't satisfactorily cater for bike lanes. So what we've come up with is a changed design in which there is a functioning bike lane, but it's not the best possible bike lane. There is functioning parking and loading, but it's not the best possible parking and loading. And there's a functioning footpath, but it's not the best possible footpath. Every one of those elements has had to compromise something in order for the street to be able to function. And if we weren't to go ahead with this particular design as we are presenting it tonight, the street just would not function. So I'm pleased that officers have been able to come back to us with a proposal that will work. It will, it's not perfect. Yes, we can all sit here and pick fault with it, but I'm sure Councillor Copsey would love her gold-plated bike lane, but she's not getting that. And I would love more parking and loading, and I'm not getting that. And people would love, big wide footpaths and things. We're not able to do that through the entire length of the street, but the street will function as we are presenting this here tonight. One of the commentators, or one of the people speaking to this earlier tonight, mentioned something about Albert Road, that if we build a bike lane here, it's going to somehow absolve us of responsibility for building a bike lane in Albert Road. I've met with lots of residents in Albert Road, and I've made it perfectly clear to them that they're also going to get a bike lane at some point in time in the future, and they're fully aware that if this one goes ahead, it's not going to mean that suddenly we don't need a bike lane in Albert Road, because there is going to be one there. And I said to them, I'll do the same thing with their proposal when it comes to their particular street as I've done here, is I want to make sure we have a street that functions. I can't support a proposal that would introduce two wonderful elements, but the third element fails. So I will have the same principles and the same approach to Albert Road as I've taken here, in that what I primarily wanted is a street that will function. I believe we've got that here tonight, and I congratulate the officers for taking on board the feedback we gave them at the last meeting, and they've come back with something that does work for the street, although not ideal for anyone who wants one particular element of the street to function as best as it possibly could. So I commend this to my fellow councillors and hope they will support this proposal here tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Martin.
When I joined the council, I had what I thought was a healthy cynicism about council's decision-making processes, and since I've been on the council, there's a very strong view about many in our community that council doesn't believe in consultation, that our consultation process are a sham, decisions are made in back rooms. This is a perfect example of the fact that that is not true. I have been involved in so many individual and group consultation meetings. I've read so many submissions. As Councillor Bond has just said, I don't think anyone's got exactly what they want, but I think after well over a year of discussions, we've come up with a very workable compromise. Our officers have shown the patience of Job in working with us. The council have spent many, many hours. Two other councillors and myself were actually down in Park Street today for one last look to make sure we were doing the right thing. Perfect example of how a council should work, and I believe that we should support this excellent motion.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. Councillor Consolo.
Thank you for the community consultation. It's incredible in-depth feedback that it's really shaped and been important in my view and decision making. There's a strong agreement in the beautification aspect, but mixed reviews in the bike path. Again, I wish the super tram stop was not there. We'd maybe have a different result, but you would still have a bike lane. It's just that it would sit across it a bit differently. However, I think the designing connection will enhance some priorities of this area. It's not perfect, but in a dense established area, it is hard to make everyone happy. There's a lot of potential in this street, and this is titled the Park Street Streetscape Improvement, and the bike path is only one aspect of the works. I know the e-scooters are controversial, but they demonstrate the significant increase in use and need. Not having a bike lane, it would be more dangerous of the pedestrians. They would just start riding on it, even though they're not supposed to. I'm actually curious what the future of these lanes will be called if it's not just used by bikes anymore. This is more like a different mode of transport, speed, path, a network we need to get people around. There's more to this process after tonight, if it gets up, is that we go into detailed design in the construction phases and we start to see where more details hashed out or taken on board some of the comments here tonight. So I think that's great that this process has been well adapted or adopted by the community and used, and we'll see some of those details coming through. So I'm going to support this project tonight. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's as good as we're going to get for now. And what we're doing, these bike paths, if it has to be a change later, we might be able to do something. But right now, this is what I think we should go with.
Thanks, Councillor Consolo. Sorry, Councillor Sirikoff, to come back to you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank the community for all the feedback they put into the surveys and also the presentation to us from the council officers. The Park Street development has gone through a number of iterations, and I agree with the beautification of the Park Street. I think it's going to look fabulous. I agree that bikes are a great way to get around and is a healthy way to get fit, as one of the speakers spoke about tonight. But we need to remember that Park Street is a highly used road for traffic to move across our city, and this will be compounded when Anzac Station is in use and growing with commuter numbers. I am in favour of this development, but the bike lane should not be considered at this stage, not until we have assessed the movement of tram commuters to and from Anzac Station and the pressures of large and small vehicles on this important corridor across our city. I see that we need another iteration of the Park Street development, and that is to consider bike lanes at a later stage once we have assessed public transport and private and commercial vehicle traffic movement. While it's got a lot of things going for it, I think it still is not quite right. And so unfortunately at this stage, I will not be supporting this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Sirikoff. I'll quickly speak to it. I've been fairly consistent and I don't expect to convince you otherwise over the past 2 years or year and a half in my position on this. I also opposed the original one that went out and will continue to do so, but I'm not going to overdo myself by imagining I'll be able to convince you with some words here this evening. I've said enough on that topic and I think you're all very clear about my position on it. I do want to note that collaboration and cohesive work nature between particularly Councillor Copsey and Councillor Bond to develop the solution that councillors are considering here this evening, and also reiterate the comments made by Councillor Bond and Councillor Copsey in terms of what the officers have been able to generate here in terms of a solution. Any further speakers on the item? Now ask Councillor Copsey to close.
Thank you. I will just address the point that's been raised through debate around, potential for delaying. I think it's actually a really good time to be trying to upgrade this street and to acknowledge that it's going to become a much more pedestrian trafficked area as the station proceeds, and indeed that we're going to need to accommodate all forms of transport, particularly sustainable and active transport, as is Council's position in encouraging healthy and well communities. In terms of delaying, I want to take a moment also in closing to acknowledge the great partnership that is being undertaken here and our funding partner in the state government via our Projects Victoria. We can do more when we work in partnership, and so I think that this has been a fantastic opportunity to work in partnership, and it's something that we're developing I've got to say, I think that officers have developed a fantastic working relationship and shown time and again that we get better outcomes when we are collaborative in these projects than otherwise would be the case. That said, Council's also contributing significant fund from our Transport Reserve to make sure that we have a streetscape here that's ready for the future, doesn't wait until other changes are baked in. And what I would say is that all road users right now, this day, are deserving of a safe environment in which to travel. It's not currently safe on Park Street, and it's very necessary that we improve the experience of that, principally for vulnerable road users. And I think that needs to be acknowledged. And people who are moving about on shared mobility devices, there's an interesting tension, as Councillor Consolo has pointed out, developing, where they're still vulnerable road users, in traffic. So I think that we are going to need increased shared resources, but also that this work is well due to service the pedestrians and people who are already using Park Street. So I think it's great that we're getting on with it now and that we're going to get a great result. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. I'll put that motion to you. Councillors, all those in favour? Those against?
Can I call division, please?
Yeah. Absolutely, you may. That motion's carried, but we'll call the division. All those in favour? Bond... Councillors Bond, Councillors Copsey, Councillor Consolo, Councillor Martin, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Baxter. Those against, Councillor Sirikoff, Councillor Pearl and Councillor Clark. The motion is carried. Under Meeting Procedure Rule 19, I now propose that we move item 13.2 to now. So we can ensure those people in the gallery that have been waiting very, very patiently get home to their families as soon as humanly possible. Councillors, we're now considering, just to be clear, item 13.2, Childcare Centres Improvement, proposed adjustments on timeline. Councillors, questions of the officers from you, please. Go ahead.
Can I take
Councillor
one of the questions? Questions that was called in, I think it was Louise Hurd, about
Please.
The maintenance levy being reduced during this process.
Chris Carroll, could you help us out with that? So I think to the lines that are we considering reducing the maintenance levy as this process continues? Could we rather? Sorry, not are we. Could we? Yep, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor, we aren't at the present, but certainly we could do some analysis of that and report back if you'd like.
Further through you, Mayor.
Please. Tony Keenan, yep.
If Councillor Consolo's question was in response to a question from the public, so in discussions with the three centres, we were told if a decision was made to sell or close centres, we would talk about providing support then. Myself or any other officer would have no authority to offer support financial support, but we can take that on notice and consider it and bring back a recommendation. But I just wanted for the record to say that no offer was made for support during this period. We said that we would meet with the centres about support if a decision was taken to close the centres.
Thank you, Tony Keenan. I'll just take one of the questions up also, which was from Caroline Thornton in relation to the date, potential error in the report.
Through you, Mayor. I think that was a noting of what was in a previous report. In hindsight, I mean, we can update, that could have been updated, and I know there's some potential proposals to do that tonight.
That's fine. Thank you so much for the acknowledgement there. Appreciate that. Councillors, any further questions from you or questions you'd like to take up from the public? No? Okay. Councillors, we have a officer's rec or something else, and I see Councillor Crawford would like to move an alternate motion, I assume. Councillor Crawford?
Yes, I do, please. It might need, I think, CEO, do I need to email it, or have you sent it through?
Through you, Mayor, just check if governance have got it yet. I just asked for it to be sent through to you. Have you received it?
I can.
Can you put it up on the screen so Councillor...
Just also ask if it's possible to circulate to councillors on email if that's okay.
I'll do it now.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. That's also, councillors, been emailed to you. She moved. Councillors, just have a 5-minute adjournment. I'll also ask the officers, if from a governance point of view, if they could just check the the proposed alt motion as it's put up complies with the governance rules and any amendments that councillors wish to make. So let's just take 5 minutes and come back at 8:57. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Crawford has moved, well, this is seeking to move an alternate motion. Councillor Crawford, get you to read the alternate and just make sure it matches with what's on the screen, if you may.
Okay. That Council halts the process of the intention to sell the 3 early childhood centres. 2, completes the engagement process so that feedback can be used to inform the analysis of future options. 3, requests the CEO to provide a report to Council on possible options, including and not limited to consideration of upgrade, refurbishment, rebuilding, relocation, lease-to-own arrangements, community purchase. 4, investigates and analyses further possible funding options, including seeking clarity from the VSBA on funding options and timeframes. And then 5, includes and applies the following principles in analysing the viability of options to inform the options analysis report required in 2 above. No permanent loss of the total places in council-operated or community-managed centres in Elwood, East St Kilda or St Kilda, as reported in the KISP. Buildings to be fit for purpose and compliant with any regulatory requirements, including DDA compliance with necessary exemptions. Centres that service the local area and promote healthy travel to centres, provides families access to a variety of models and scale of centres, maximises funding opportunities from state or federal governments, broader community benefit included gender considerations and alignment with Council's adopted policies. 6 notes that some of the options in 3 may require restarting an intention to sell process in the future if the preferred option of Council involves sale of one or more of the properties. And 7 notes that the CEO and officers will continue to work collaboratively with the committees of management from each of the 3 centres.
Thanks. I see Councillor Backer is willing to second. I'll seek advice on my own point of order under section 26.2, which reads, a motion to confirm a previous resolution of Council cannot be amended. I'm assuming 26.3 doesn't come into fruition because it's not an amendment. So could I get advice from officers under 26.2 if the alt motion is suitable under our governance rules, please?
Through you, Mayor, a motion to confirm a previous resolution of Council cannot be amended. I'm just trying to seek to understand your question.
Does this motion that's being put to Council contradict, confirm that basically it relates to a previous motion in some respects that confirmed a previous resolution of Council? Is this able to be amended in any way, shape or form?
So through you, Mayor, I've just spoke to Councillor's lawyer. The topic of the Council report tonight is the sale of the 3 childcare centres because it was moved as an alternative motion, and section 26 is about moving an amendment, not about moving an alternative motion. 26.2 relates to moving an amendment, not moving an alternative motion. The initial advice I have from the lawyers is that because it's on topic, the motion is permissible, but that was a very quick conversation with the lawyers. Council may wish to defer this to get further advice, but on the advice I've got available to me tonight, I'm not sure 26.2 would apply, as that's about moving an amendment. An amendment has not been moved as far as I understand it. It's an alternative motion has been moved.
So to foreshadow if there's any, I'm not foreshadowing an amendment, etc., but I imagine there's probably some questions about whether or not this can be put on the basis that it is contrary to the officer's recommended motion here this evening. My interpretation of the rules is that because the motion, as was printed in the agenda, has not been put, or an amendment to the motion, and probably we need some adjustment in the rules here, but this is why we have them, so we can adjust them, that the alternate motion that Councillor Crawford and Councillor has put and Councillor Baxter has seconded is valid. Based on legal advice we've verbally received, it perhaps indicates it's not best practice to do so, and the CEO has indicated what would be a perhaps more advisable route to take should councillors wish to consider this. I don't see, ruling on my own point of order, that this is out of order, but willing to take any of your points if you wish to do so. Councillor Crawford, you're free to speak to your alt motion.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, just before we do, are we able to, there's some numbers there that I think are incorrect that we can fix up.
No worries.
Where it says note that some of the options in 3, I think that actually refers to 4, and there was another one that said above in 2, and I think that's now 3 because there's been some renumbering. Sorry, just to make that clear before we get started on everything else.
No problem at all.
And just double check, because I'm a bit sleep deprived, so make sure my numbers are right.
Through you, Mayor. Governors, can you just go back up to 3, because I thought point 3 described the options and therefore 6 is correct.
At the bottom of this page where it says options analysis report required in 2 or above, that needs to change to 3, but the other one can stay at 3. You're right.
It's a minor amendment, so if you both agree to it, which I assume you do, that's fine. Councillor Crawford, feel free to speak to the motion. Yep.
I found myself in a difficult place tonight, and I do want to apologise to my fellow councillors that I've been working closely with over the last few days, that I have brought this motion as opposed to the one that we have been working on. What I'm trying to do with, or seek your support on this one, is to try and reset where we're at. I think there is so much new information that's come on board, and we've heard very strongly from our community that they want every other option to be explored, and sale is really the last resort or not at all from our community. And we've heard it loudly and clearly. We're almost, in a way, at the end of that process anyway. We are just waiting to hear back on the feedback and then the officers to do work on the various options. But I wanted to kind of clear the air a little, try and rebuild some of the trust that this whole process is not a direct agenda to sell them, because that's actually not our intent, and it never was. It was we thought it was one of the options, and obviously information has changed to deal with how we provide excellent childcare in this city. But we've heard about the intangibles, which I'm always banging on about, and the community has highlighted for me. That sense of community, the support, the cohesion, the mental health, the belonging, all of those things that we want for our community to feel are captured in these centres, and they are far more than just somewhere that our children get a great early education. So by this motion, I'm trying to, by halting the process of the intention to sell, what it does is it gives a pause to reassure the community that we are seriously looking at all the other options. My preference is to keep the 3 centres, but we do need to do more work. So I guess I'm asking you to support this, and we've hopefully, in some of the principles that are embedded in this motion, there are some of the principles that those intangibles have been captured a little more, not fully. I think as being intangibles we can't capture them all, but it picks up on some of the conversations that we've been having with the many centres over the last month or so. It doesn't mean that it still won't be difficult, and I know there's a lot of stress in the community, and so this motion is trying to reassure that we are interested in really exploring and finding solutions to keep the 3 centres, genuinely doing that. However, it's still a process to go, and we've still got funding to get and work things out. And it also gives breathing space for councillors and officers to do the work. I think there's a lot of requests for information and all of the stuff from both centres and councillors, and the officers actually need space to be able to go and look at these various options and come back to us so that we can actually make a fair decision. Now, I'm not sure if I'll get full support on this, but I guess I'm bringing it in the hope that maybe it will get up, but also to point out to the community that we are listening. We genuinely want to find a solution, and this is not an easy process, either for councillors, officers or the community.
Thanks, Councillor Crawford. Councillor Baxter is the seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, I've put a lot of work and spent a long time writing up, I would say, most of this motion, though it's hard to tell exactly how many words are mine. And I even, I wanted to make it clear to the community earlier today exactly what I was going to be putting tonight, so that people knew and didn't feel that they were being, that it was being sprung on them or anything like that. And obviously, since I did that, councillors have had more conversations about what we actually want to do here. I want to put on the record that this, I think, is not my preferred process for how we would get to this outcome, nor is the process we've been in. What I would have preferred to do is amend the process that we've been in, put us on a better footing, restore some trust with the community, and make it clear that we're exploring all different options, and that was the intention of what I wanted to do. Halting the sale entirely, I think, is a bit riskier than what I would have preferred to do, but it does sort of end up with roughly the same outcome of what I wanted, which is for us to look at those other options. So I will support it. It's basically what I want to do, but not quite the way I want to do it, if that makes sense. I want to talk a little bit about sort of how we got here. Obviously, in December, we voted for an intention to sell process, and I think it's pretty clear that every councillor voted for that process for different reasons. No doubt some councillors may have voted for it and going, we intend to sell and we're going to sell, and I'm not really interested in seeing other options, whereas other councillors like myself really just wanted to open this up to consultation and see what was going to pop up out of it, as sort of traumatic as that process can be. And I think we have learned quite a lot through the consultation process, not just through our own errors, which I will happily acknowledge that we've made, but through politicians making offers of funding and so on. I will note that there are some politicians, sitting MPs who have been thundering at us that we need to do more here, but have yet to contribute a single cent, and I hope to see them actually doing so as we go through this process. But for me, it was really opening up that process to see where we get to. So, but we've also heard the passion from parents, committees, other community members about the value of these centres to the community. And, I knew about it, and I'd been to all of these centres and I'd met with people. But, it's different when people are telling you and they're telling you their heartfelt stories. And obviously the experiences I've had with my kids at Childcare and Kilda are going to be different from the experiences that a lot of other people have. But you see the similarities, and it's been really good for us to hear, I think. The key thing for me here is not necessarily stopping the sale, right? I think maybe that's important. I think the key thing is figuring out what we're going to do instead. Because we have to do something, right? And whether that be refurbishment of the buildings, rebuilding on site, relocation, whatever, we need to have a really clear idea about what we're doing. And that's the key thing of what I'm voting for here tonight, is for us to be going down that path and looking at those options. What are we going to do instead? Because I actually cannot live with the decision for us to just say we're not going to do anything and we're going to let the buildings continue in bad condition. We're partly responsible for that, but we need to do something, right? And I'm hoping that this also gives us enough time and information to make the best decision. Look, both Councillor Crawford and I have worked pretty hard on this motion. And we've gotten feedback from a lot of our fellow councillors. It may carry risks. It may not be perfect. There may be things that you can tell us that you don't like about it, but we hope that it provides some reassurance to the community that council is doing all it can to get the best outcome, whatever that outcome may be, and that, importantly, those principles that my fellow councillors can tell you I've been harping on for a while are embedded into that process and guiding it. So I'll commend the motion.
Thanks, Councillor Baxter. Who else would like to speak to the alternate motion? Councillor Bond, go ahead.
I won't be supporting this motion for a number of reasons. I think it's probably highly inappropriate that a motion of this nature, which is so counter to the original proposal, is shown to me a minute before it's put, and that's the first I've seen of this, and I think it's the first most of the councillors have seen of this. This is just so counterproductive to our working relationship as councillors that this occurs. I also think, I understand you're trying to halt this process and you're trying to reassure, somehow reassure the community that these buildings and childcare centres won't be sold without giving them proper consideration to what else goes on there. And I 100% agree with Councillor Baxter is that we must do something here. But I fear that this motion has just guaranteed that any opportunity for funding is probably done, coming up to 2 elections. People are going to read Councillor Crawford's Facebook post in about half-hour time and say, all right, that's it, these centres are saved. We don't need to fund them anymore. That's a very real possibility here. And officers are going to be reluctant to bring something back to us, a solution to the issue that we all agree, Councillor Baxter and I agree, that we have to tackle here for fear of having this done to them again at some point in time down the track. So I understand that it's probably not your intention, but I think through this process, through this motion, to spring this on us, to spring this on officers, to spring it on everyone at this point in time for what will no doubt be short-term political expediency for a couple of people, can condemn these centres to years of inaction, which is the worst possible outcome here. That nothing happens here and they just fall down because there's no funding to fix them up. There's no will within council to pick this up again and start it up again. So I just can't support this motion on that particular basis, that I think it gives a very real chance that nothing happens here and that these centres are just left to sit there and we don't deal with the problems that we all agree exist here that we need to look at and we need to deal with. So I certainly won't be supporting this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Bond. Who else would like to speak to the motion? Councillor Martin, go ahead.
I mentioned earlier that when I joined the council there was a lot of healthy cynicism out there about the consultation process that the council went under, and I thought the Park Street Streetscape decision represented excellent consultation. There seems to be even more, I'm trying to think of a polite word, there seem to be a lot of people who doubt the genuineness of the council and the council officers in their decisions over childcare at the moment. And if the other councils have had as many phone calls and emails and texts as I have, we've been absolutely inundated. And there's a common theme here. They don't really believe that we want to protect our childcare centres. We're happy to sell them. I'm certainly not happy to sell them, and I don't think any of my colleagues around the table here are happy to sell them either. Councillor Crawford is trying to come up with a way that can allay the concerns of people out there with this motion, and I'll comment a bit more about that in a moment. But the reason that I think we're all sitting here tonight is we've just been overwhelmed by the community support that our community childcare centres have got. I've had nearly 50 years in education. I've been on childcare centres boards for 8 years, and I've never seen this level of support for community childcare anywhere in the last couple of months. So our community's being very, very clear about what they'd like us to do. We voted back in December to investigate a sale process. Most of us were probably hoping that another alternative would come up, but we didn't make that clear at the time, and I think that reflects back on us that we should have been much clearer that our real intention was to find a solution to the issue of 3 buildings that were perhaps not fit for purpose, and that a sale was only one of them. There's been an awful lot of information that's come up since that motion was passed here back, I think, December the 4th or something like that. We've seen there are new enrolment predictions showing there are going to be more childcare places required than we believed at the time. We've seen more detailed investigations over the existing state of some of the buildings. We've seen some of our political leaders not make promises, but they're all going to drop in and save us. Well, I wonder if they will, but at the moment they're suggesting they will. If they don't, we're in trouble. Nothing would give me greater pleasure than to say to all of the people out there, the CEOs of all of our childcare centres, their staff, the parents and even the children themselves, we will save your centres, they will remain. But I can't give that certainty. All I can say is that we're going to do everything that we possibly can to come up with a viable alternative that will allow us to, if not keep you in your current buildings, at the very least keep your centres active and viable in your local community so that you don't all have to tramp off 4 or 5 kilometres to another place. We will do everything we can. Many of us spent late last night and many hours this morning trying to come up with a motion that we thought would allay those concerns. Very, very similar to the motion that Councillor Crawford has put up. The only difference was that we were going to delay any decision about the sale until all the other issues that you've seen up there have gone through. Really the only difference to what we were proposing is that Councillor Crawford is putting in the word to halt the sale process now. Now, I'm happy if this motion fails to put up an alt-rec that says delay until the end of the process. I have a concern that if we pass this motion, and I may well support it because my heart tells me I want to do it, I really want to support this motion, my head's saying to me, as Councillor Bonds has just said, are we giving false hope to our childcare centres? Everything's halted, we can all relax. And will those politicians who've been leaning on us saying, oh, you know, you can't sell childcares, will they say, oh, everything's halted, we don't need to support you anymore? So I share Councillor Bond's concerns. So my head and my heart are having a real battle at the moment. But whether Councillor Crawford's motion gets up or an alt-rec, which I'm happy to put up if this fails, which is almost identical, but simply says that we'll delay any sale till the end of the full consultation process and discussion, and that there then be another community consultation process before any final decision to sell took place. If either of those get through, at least I think we're sending a very strong message to the community that we as a council value your childcare centres. We value the work you do. We value not just the bricks and mortar, but we value all those intangibles. I was able to walk out my front door and walk 3 blocks to my local childcare centre in Elwood with my kids. And when the Anglican Church decided to sell my childcare, we were devastated. And luckily, Council at the time with the Department of Education was able to set us up in Poets Grove. So we were still able to walk. I know how I'd feel if we hadn't had Poets Grove to go to and I'd had to walk all the way to North St Kilda from Elwood at the time. I don't think my children would have liked it either. So we feel your pain. We're going to do everything we can to address your problems. But if, for example, it turns out that there's chemical contamination on a childcare site, that it's going to cost an absolute fortune to make it fit for purpose, that we need to relocate at least one of those centres, and we've told you 6 months earlier that we're going to halt the sale, you might think that we're hypocrites. So at the moment I'm wrestling with my head and my heart. My heart says support Councillor Crawford because none of us want these sales to go ahead if we can avoid them. My head says if I support this motion, am I giving false hope out there? So I've got a little bit of thinking to do in the next few minutes.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. Can I say a clarifying question, not in the process of the motion, but if this motion passes tonight, does that effectively stall the advertising process for the intention to sale? So should Council come back and wish to sell some of the centres or go through the intention process again, would that process have to restart? Chris Carroll, if you could ask that clarifying question for me.
Through you, Mayor, I believe it would. I believe that we wouldn't complete the notice of intention sales process. We'd get some advice of whether we could pick it back up again or not, or whether we'd have to restart it. So I can't give you a definitive answer tonight, but potentially.
Thank you, Chris Carroll. Councillor Consola, go ahead.
I know the community is asking for stop, halt, cancel, reset this sale, and it's very tempting to join in on this short-term win. I want to think we can heal the community confidence and trust on this issue, and for these centres who are operating businesses and that the families want to have some certainty. But I think that this has been put onto us too abruptly, that I cannot, in my best judgment, or maybe it's lack of experience, vote on it at this time. Perhaps there's merit in this option. Ultimately, my allegiance is to ensure that we go through all the options with the centres to ensure these centres can continue for generations to come. Perhaps I or another councillor will bring a cancel motion in 2 weeks' time. I do not want to defer this item as there's some items up there that I really support, and also the original motion that was advertised said that we would give Eildon Road some more clarity on that time. And this, what's posted up there, I can't see the second page, but I don't think it includes that Eildon Road time frame in what we're actually voting on at this very moment. I don't know, maybe go to the third page, if there's a third page.
Because we're halting it,
So I guess because you're halting. Okay, that makes sense. Sorry, that makes sense. But I'd also like to foreshadow an amendment for further support for centres as this process unfolds. Thank you.
No worries, I'll take that on the section 30, which is foreshadowing, so foreshadowing the officer's rec with an amendment. Yep, okay.
No, oh.
Or an amended alternate motion, just to be clear. All right, councillors, who else wishes to speak to this item? This alt motion, I should say. Councillor Clark, go ahead.
Where to start? I'm not supportive of this motion. From my perspective, it undermines all the good work that council officers have done, and I know the community has differing views, but there's been a lot of investment and process by council officers to this point. There's also been a lot of investment from councillors up until this point. It somewhat seems financially irresponsible if it risks our ability to get state government funding right when we're in the middle of those negotiations. So that could actually undermine the very outcome that the community is looking for. It's disrespectful for councillors who engaged in the process today and blows up the consultation process, just to name a few things. In my view, there's no need for this. It's clearly not in the interests of the councils, and irrespective of what outcome is achieved through the process, the consultation process has been extended. It's not going to finish till April-ish, so we're not close to finishing, and the reason we're not close to finishing is because it's a comprehensive and detailed process and a commitment that we made to the community over many facilitated community meetings. So it has a long way to go. And I don't believe we need to provide communication of the matter via council motions. We have a website. We're providing information on the website via email and all of the meetings that we've been having. And there will be further meetings, and everyone's aware of that. And there are meetings going on with government, as I mentioned before, nothing is off the agenda at this stage, and everyone is well aware of that, irrespective of the comments that are made. And we should be under no misunderstanding that this is purely political, as evidenced by the fact that it was put on Facebook earlier this afternoon. It's a poor process, and it's hard to see how this can be in the long-term interest of council, the childcare centres, irrespective of whether they are retained, rebuilt or sold. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Who else would like to speak to the alt motion? There being no further, I'll ask Councillor Crawford. Actually, no, just before I ask Councillor Crawford, I'll foreshadow, just to be clear, so under the governance rules under 30, if this fails, that I hold the right to move the offer's recommendation. I note that Councillor Martin and Councillor Consolo has also done a foreshadow, but just to be very clear, if this fails, there's been a few foreshadows out there. Councillor Crawford, feel free to close.
I did apologise to my fellow councillors at the start. I am aware this is not my usual style, bringing things this late. I'm particularly grateful to Councillor Baxter for seconding along with me, knowing it's been particularly difficult given the work he's put in. This is that battle between head and heart, and my practical sense doesn't want to give false hope. But my heart also wants to listen to my community, and I brought this because I'm listening. Doesn't really sound like it's going to get up, but you never know. We've still got moments till we vote. This is a really difficult process for everyone, but I just want to reassure you that many councillors, I can't speak for all councillors, I am very committed to keeping the 3 centres. We hear how valued the community early childhood centres are in our community for what they bring to the children, but also to the parents and the broader community. I will just point out, putting it on Facebook was not a political. I'll take the disrespectful for the lateness, but I won't take the hypocrisy around putting things on Facebook when many councillors do that for many things, and I rarely do that. So that was actually to let our community know that we were bringing it and that we were listening. That was what it was about. So the hypocrisy of councillors to refer otherwise.
Let's just be careful with the word hypocrisy, Councillor Crawford, okay?
Hypocrisy of councillors, when all of us do that, I will not take that on. I do ask you to maybe vote with your hearts and not your head. I'm not hopeful at this point, but thank you for considering this alt motion.
Put that motion to you, councillors. All those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? The motion has failed. I'll call the division as chair just to make sure I got that right. I don't want to stuff this up at all tonight. All those in favour? Councillor Copsey, Councillors Baxter, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Martin. All those against? Councillor Clark, Councillor Pearl, Councillor Sirikoff, Councillor Bond, and an abstention, which is Councillor Consolo. That motion has failed. There's been a number of foreshadows. I won't do a movement of a motion unless somebody wishes to do so. Yeah, I'm just waiting for someone to move it. I can move the officer's rep, but I'd prefer somebody else to do it. Yeah, okay.
CEO?
Yep, that's fine. You've foreshadowed an alternate motion, so you're well within your rights to do that. Go ahead.
Can we pop it up there?
Through you, Mayor, Governance, can you pop that up? I'm not sure if you included part 9 of that, Councillor Martin, that you sent to me.
Just a request of officers, do you want to take is it going to take 5 minutes or 10 minutes? All right, we'll adjourn the council meeting for 5 minutes, just so councillors, if they wish to stretch their legs. Not going to live that one down. Stretch your legs, councillors. You're good to have a chuckle at this time of night. 5 minute adjournment, go for it. Alternate motion to item 13.2, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll read it from my laptop and I hope that what I'm reading is identical to what's on the screen. If it's not, councillors, please let me know. So this is the Alt-Rec 2 13.2 Childcare Centres Improvement Adjustment to Sale Timeframe. The motion reads that Council 1 notes that in relation to each proposed sale, a community engagement process in accordance with Section 114 brackets 2 brackets B of the Act has commenced, including ongoing dialogue and information sharing with the committees of management of the relevant childcare centres to identify any alternative viable options for sale, and request the CEO to expedite the report on the engagement and feedback received on the proposed sale of the 3 early childhood centres. 2. Requests the CEO to provide a report to Council on possible options including and not limited to consideration of upgrade refurbishment, rebuilding, relocation, lease-to-own arrangements, community purchase. 3. Investigates and analyses further possible funding options, including seeking clarity from the VSBA on funding options and timeframes. That's the Victorian Schools Building Authority. 4. Includes and applies the following principles in analysing the viability of options to inform the options analysis report required in 2 above. Point 1. No permanent loss of the total places in council-operated or community-managed centres in Elwood, East St Kilda or St Kilda as reported in the KISP. Point 2. Buildings to be fit for purpose and compliant with any regulatory requirements, including DDA compliance, brackets with necessary exemptions. Point 3. Centres that service the local area and promote healthy travel to centres. Point 4. Provides families access to a variety of models and scale of centres. Point 5. Maximises funding opportunities from state or federal governments. Point 6. broader community benefit including gender considerations. Point 7, alignment with Council's adopted policies. Point 5, notes that Council will not make a final decision on the sale of the properties and the future of the services until they have the feedback from the community engagement and the options analysis. 6, in relation to the potential sale of 17 Eildon Road, St Kilda, moves the indicative timing of its settlement from early 2023 to the end of 2023. 7, acknowledges the value provided by the respective centres to the community and the municipality, and as a matter of principle shall endeavour to minimise the uncertainty and disruption to the delivery of those services. Point 8, notes that the CEO and officers will continue to work collaboratively with the committees of management from each of the 3 centres, and we've just added, and this was not circulated to councillors earlier today, but a new point 9 in line with Councillor Consolo's comments a few minutes ago, requests the CEO to bring back options for support for the centres during this process, such as, but not limited to, reduction in maintenance levies.
Councillor Baxter is willing to second the motion. Oh, sorry, pardon me. Point of order or question?
No, just a clarifying question. Can
You
I
go for it.
confirm that the motion that's on the board and the motion that Councillor Martin just read out is the one that Peter emailed to us about 9 minutes ago?
Correct.
And that's all right. Thank you.
That's the affirmative, yep. Thanks for clarifying. So Councillor Baxter seconded your motion. If I could just ask what clarify... No, actually, you go. Please feel free to speak to your motion, Councillor Martin.
I've spoken for about 10 minutes earlier about what I've felt in my engagement with the community about what they want to do with the childcare centres. I spoke about how my heart desperately wants to save these centres if we can, and my head wasn't quite sure about the correct way of doing it. I voted for the last motion. Head was 50-50, heart was 100%. This time the heart is 100% and the head is 100% as well, because not only is this making it very clear to our community that we're not going to do anything to proceed to sale until we've had a formal analysis of both the community engagement and all the other documentation that we've got so far and will be getting further down the track. But it also addresses issues such as the date about the Eildon Road sale. So if for some reason this process dragged on and there was no clear recommendation from the council, Eildon Road have at least clarity that they're certainly going to be with us till at least the end of 2023. And it acknowledges the work that those communities do, the work that those centres do in our community, not just the financial value that we can place on the bricks and mortar there, but the intrinsic value that we can place on the goodwill and community spirit that are developed by those early learning centres with their communities. And then last but not least, in view of the question from one of the childcare CEOs earlier today, asking us to investigate options for supporting the centres during the process, for example, by a reduction in the maintenance levies, that's been added in. Councillors, you didn't see that. The rest of this document is almost identical with what we saw at 5 o'clock today, but that last point has come in as a result of the community question time. So I'm very, very comfortable with what's in here. I think it covers... It makes it probably just as clear to the committee as the motion that failed earlier that we aren't going to sell any of these centres until we've had an exhaustive investigation and we've come back to council and analysed all that. But in addition to that, it gives clarity to the Eildon Road community, and it also lets the communities know that we're going to look at how is there a way that we can support them during this, what must be a very, very stressful process for those communities. And members of the public, I can assure you it's an enormously stressful time for councillors as well. And I know that councillors sitting around this table all have different ways of wanting to solve this problem, but I know that all 9 of us are desperate to find a solution that is both viable and makes our communities happy. We just have slightly different ways of wanting to get there.
Thanks very much, Councillor Martin. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Mayor. Sometimes you read your own words so many times that you don't even know what they're saying anymore. But I think that this is it's still a good way to get through this process. Arguably a better way. I think that something that I want to highlight is really important. These principles that we're wanting to use to guide the process here. I really felt that it was important to make these explicit. So one of the key things that people were talking about during the consultation was about the loss in community childcare spaces out of this, out of the sort of the proposed sale. So this is now saying that we're going to have a principle that guides us, that we don't want that. All right, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but we don't want that. There's some other things in here that I think we were going for anyway, but it's important to spell out that we want fit for purpose buildings. We want them to be compliant. We want, one of the other things that people have said to us that it's sort of intangible, it's hard to quantify, is centres that service the local area and promote healthy travel to centres. A lot of people were saying that they want to walk their kids to the childcare or kinder, and they don't want to have to drive, and that's not just about convenience, that's actually about an important element of promoting healthy travel and local community. They've also said that they value the variety of different models. Most of the people, obviously, who have given feedback reckon that community childcare is the bee's knees and the absolute best, because they're obviously affected. But in general, people have also expressed support for for council provided childcare, and that they want to be able to have that choice, and I think that that's important as well. Maximising funding opportunities from state or federal governments, I think, is really important, and it goes back to those politicians that have said a lot but have not contributed a single cent yet. They need to put up or shut up, I think, at this point. We are definitely pursuing conversations with the state government with regards to funding streams, building blocks, and with the VSBA for options there, absolutely. But we know that in order to get the absolute best outcome, there would probably need to be a few streams of funding here, and I think that it being an election year is now the perfect time for some of these politicians to make election commitments. We've also heard about the broader community benefit, including gender considerations in terms of the workforce that is employed in these centres. This is something that I think is in all of our policies, but needs to be spelled out as being of specific importance as part of this process, and of course alignment with council's adopted policies. There is a reason we've put these principles in here that will guide this process. It's because the community didn't believe that these principles were guiding that process. Whether or not that's true, and I think our officers have actually done the best job they can under difficult circumstances, with often conflicting direction from councillors and all sorts of problems, including COVID and stuff like that. I get that, but I also acknowledge that that we've made some mistakes and we need to make some clear declarations of intent here, and this is what we're hoping to do. So that, I think, is probably, to me, the key element of this, including all the other things that it says there. But I'm hoping that this puts us on a new footing, that the community can trust that we really are looking at other options, and we're saying that we are. In a meeting, in a decision, and then we're talking about the kinds of things that are important to us in looking at those options. And hopefully that will allow us to start a new and more fruitful conversation about what we're going to do with these sites.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Baxter, rather. Who else wishes to speak to the alt motion? Councillor Consolo.
Thank you. I voted back in December to go to community consultation with an amendment that demonstrated my true interest in deeply exploring all options. Perhaps this was wrong, but the issue isn't going away. I wish we could go back in time and address the whole thing from a different, but we can't, and even a reset tonight wouldn't take away some of the lingering fallout. I'm supporting this alt motion tonight because, first, the Eildon Road Centre community deserves some clarity and dates while we work through a big process of how to move forward. Ideally, the sale never happens. This issue, again, is not going away. I fear if we cancel this point, so that's why we're pausing. We're taking a sidestep to focus on the other options and really make sure that we solve the problem, because, we could easily kick the can down the road, but, in 20 years, we want to say that we made the right decision for these centres because we value them so much. There was great debate in the last alt motion, and a lot of this overlaps of what was a very big collaborative process in the last few days. I can only claim a very small part of it. Things move pretty slowly, sometimes at council, but in council day they move pretty quick, and I'm confident I can support this tonight. So first, it's giving Eildon Road some clarity to push back to the end of 2023, that it tells the community that it's kind of an internal direction on some things, but it's the external message to our community that we value, and we're going to explore these options. And last, that item about support, I think it's really important that we heard tonight that maybe this hasn't been fair, where our support is, what the levies are, things like that, that we need to get that in motion to hear what our options are and help out where we can. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Consola. Who else would like to speak to this? Councillor Crawford, go ahead.
I'll happily support this motion, although it's not exactly where I would have liked to land. It does achieve a lot of what I was trying to in the last motion. You know, should this pass, and hopefully it will, I'm actually really excited to look at what those other possibilities are and continue the conversations with the other levels of government around co-funding. I think, you know, out of difficult things, good things come, and this process continues to remind me how great our local community is and how passionate you are about looking out for each other and your children and the place we live. And so on that side, there is an upside to reminding us what really matters. So yeah, I'll be very happy to support this. I'm sorry we didn't get there on the other one, but yeah, taking this sidestep, as Councillor Consolo says, to really, really drill down on the various options, I think will be good, and hopefully we get to a good decision sometime soon.
Thanks, Councillor Crawford. Who else would like to speak to the motion? For good order, I'll foreshadow if this fails that I'll move the officer's rec. I don't think it is, but let's see what happens. Councillor Clark, go ahead.
So there's nothing in this motion that is any different from how we're conducting ourselves through this process anyway. The principles, the information in there is how the discussions and how things are being guided. They're the things that would be considered and are being considered. So nothing in this motion changes anything from how the consultation process is going to move forward. The one thing I would say is it's good to give Eildon Road some certainty around the timeframe, and that can have been done in a different way. So my objection to this motion isn't what's contained in it. It's just that it's a communication piece, and there's other ways of communicating this information, and a lot of it has been communicated. I understand that the community may be sceptical about that, but I'm not sure this motion really changes their scepticism anyway. Hopefully it does, but we have many ways of communicating, and as I mentioned previously, the ways we are doing it. So this motion actually changes nothing in the process, and using motions as a form of communication is not what I think is a great use of council time. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. If I could ask a clarifying question on probably the dot points on the section 4 are probably better as numbers, but that's fine. So 4.1, no permanent loss of total places in council-operated or community-managed centres in Elwood, St Kilda East, St Kilda, as reported in KISP. This implies the following principles in analysing. Is council endorsing a position not to have a loss of permanent positions under this, or is it simply guidelines to be followed? If I get a clarification on that.
As the mover, I can reply if you like.
I prefer an officer to start with, if that's okay, and then feel free to add to it.
Through you, Mayor, the way that officers would interpret it as a principle would be something that we would be very mindful of in assessing the options against, but it wouldn't completely constrain all the options not to consider what might be a loss of places.
Thanks. As a mover, feel free to clarify.
What I was about to say.
Perfect. Any further speakers to the item, councillors? Councillor Sirikoff, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to ask also, about this motion, that these are just guidelines or principles and not promises.
I think that's all I asked, but I'll allow it. Let's just broaden it out to the whole motion.
Through you, Mayor,
Section
they're guiding principles, and we will weigh those up in our consideration of options. Some of those principles on some of those options might conflict each other, and we'll bring that advice back to Council.
Yeah, I guess I should clarify why I was saying that, because while I'm...
Clarify your clarifying question?
Yeah, I want to clarify my clarifying question, please. Because while I'm very supportive that we go through the process and we have community
consultation... Councillor Sirikoff, question, please.
Oh, it has to be
I need a question.
So...
You are asking a question, or are you speaking to the motion? Go ahead, point of order. Under what section? Under what section?
Yep. It is under 49.2, a question of procedure.
And what is your point of order?
That she's actually speaking to the motion, not asking a clarifying question.
I'm asking her to clarify that, Councillor Crawford, and thank you for my first ever point of order.
I was wanting to clarify my question.
Are you asking a clarifying question, or are you speaking, Councillor Sirikoff?
I want to clarify my question.
No.
Okay.
Point of order.
I've just ruled. Okay.
Okay.
Councillor Sirikoff, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I'd like to speak to the
Go
motion
ahead.
now. Thank you, Mayor. I like the intent of this motion and what it's trying to convey to all the childcare centres and the parents at the childcare centres. It really doesn't address anything more than what's in the motion that was put by the officers. And because they are principles and guidelines that we're addressing here, I hope that we can deliver something that makes a good win for the residents and the childcare centres. But because they're principles and guidelines, we can't make those promises because it all depends on what the outcome of the exploration and investigation by the council officers and what they bring back to us. So I just hope that we get a good outcome for everyone.
Thanks, Councillor Sirikoff. Anybody else wish to speak? Okay, I'll ask Councillor Martin to close.
Firstly, can I thank all of my council colleagues and the officers that we've been dealing with, particularly over the last 48 hours, but possibly over the last 2 months, for all the time and effort that they put into this. And in particular, can I single out the 3 Canal Ward councillors and Mayor Pearl, who have put countless hours into dealing with constituents and trying to come up with, listening to feedback and trying to come back with, which probably led to this alt-rec that we've come up with today, which has had feedback from nearly everyone sitting around this table. And we may not have pleased everyone with everything we've got there, but I'm commending the motion to you because I think it generally picks up on where we'd like to be. It does have a couple of definitive statements. And yes, Councillor Clark is right. There are some statements there that are really strong guidelines and advice to our officers in what they're doing. But we are very clear that there will be no final decision on the sale of the properties and the future of the services until council's had feedback from the community engagements and the options analysis. We've been very clear about the sale of Eildon Road. We've been very clear about investigating if we can provide support for the centre. So there's a tiny bit more clarity for our centres than we've had before. We're not promising you there that your 4 centres, because there are 4 centres involved in all this, will be in exactly the same situation in 10 years' time as they are now. Things could be different. They may not even be on the same sites. It may be necessary for all sorts of reasons to move a centre. We have no idea. All we're going to do is to work I'm not allowed to say it, we're going to work extremely hard to try and make sure that we come up with viable options so we can keep the 4 centres servicing their local communities in some form or another. Hopefully we've given you that clarity. And I urge community members to respectfully continue to approach councillors, continue to provide us advice respectfully. To those people today who provided me advice that wasn't so respectful, I've got a long memory, but for those of you who are happy to provide respectful advice, please continue to do that. We need your assistance. I think we're all on the same page. We want a good outcome for everyone. if this motion gets up, I look forward to working with you to reach that outcome.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. All those in favour of that motion, I put it to you. All those against? That's carried. Who wants to call it? Councillor Crawford calls a division. Just turn your microphones on next time if possible. That motion carry out. All those in favour? Councillor Sirikoff, Councillor Copsey, Councillor Consolo, Councillor Pearl, Councillor Martin, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Baxter. All those against? Councillor Clark. All those abstaining? I'll take that as Councillor Bond. That motion is carried. Thank you to everybody that stayed behind here this evening. There's only a few of you here, but we do appreciate you hanging around for. Sorry, the chair is terrible at doing this. On the previous vote, if the minutes could reflect that Councillor Pearl voted in favour of that. In my head, I said that out, but apologies. I clearly didn't say it in my mouth. Motion is carried. So thank you for hanging around for almost 4.5 hours. We do very much appreciate that, and please have a safe journey home. We now move to item 11.1, councillors, the amendment of C203, Port Planning Scheme Review, consideration of submissions. Councillors, any questions of officers in relation to item 11.1? I'm looking for a mover of the officer's recommendation or something else. Thank you, Councillor Bond and Councillor Copsey. Councillor Bond, do you wish to speak? No. Councillor Copsey, do you wish to speak as the seconder?
This is a really important piece of work, and I just want to acknowledge that it's also a large piece of work, and thank the officers for all of the hard work in progressing this this process to this point, and wish them all the best for planning panel as the next step. Thank you.
Great. Anybody else wish to speak to the item? Thanks, Councillor Consolo.
So I do have a clarifying question. Maybe
Go ahead.
It's too late to ask this, but
no.
So in 3.2 it says request that we appoint an independent panel. If that gets denied, it'll come back to us to reconsider?
I'll allow that. Brian, if you could clarify if that statement in the report is correct.
We will request an independent panel. The practice is, and indeed I think it's the requirement, is for us to do that where there is a number of objectors so that those issues can be determined. So we are very confident that based on that practice note that our request will be successful and we will go to a panel.
Thanks, Brian T. Anyone else wish to speak to the item? Or against the item, that is? Okay. No. Councillor Bond, you wish to close? No. And I'll put that to you. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. We now move, councillors, to item 13.1, which is records of informal meetings of council. Councillors, any questions of the officers in relation to this? I'm happy to move, and I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Consolo. I don't wish to speak. Councillor Consolo, do you wish to speak? Anybody else wish to speak? I don't wish to close now. Put the motion to you. That all those in favour? That is carried. Item 14 is notices of motions. Councillors, we have no notice of motion on tonight's agenda. So I'll move now to item 15, which is reports by councillor delegates. Councillors, any reports from your activities? There being none, I'll move to item 16, which is items of urgent business. Councillors, do you have any items of urgent business this evening? There being none, I'll move now to item 17. Councillors, following the withdrawal of item 17.2, M9 Advocacy Housing, we have one confidential report listed on tonight's agenda, being 17.1 M9 Waste. Councillor Clark, I'm fine for you to declare conflict of interest. Let's do it later, actually. We'll close the meeting, then you can declare it and leave. I now call upon a councillor to move that the meeting be closed to members of the public to consider a confidential item. Councillor Bond the move and Councillor Consolo the second. I'll now put that motion. That motion is carried. Councillors, we will now conclude the public part of the meeting in WebEx, and thank you to all of you that have joined here this evening. I advise members of the public that there are no further items to be discussed, and this will be the conclusion of the public meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight.